Thank you, everyone. Please sit down. Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's full council meeting. Welcome to members of the public watching us remotely on YouTube, and particular warm welcome to those members of the public joining us in person in the gallery today. Once again, for those who are joining us for the first time this evening, I'll quickly reiterate the safety information. Should there be an alarm this evening, please leave the chamber by your nearest exit and congregate on College Green near the cathedral. Everyone's asked to remain seated 1 metre apart, please, for COVID precautions. We do have additional precautions in place, for example, having all of the windows open, and everyone is advised to wear masks except when speaking or if you have a medical exemption. Members will be aware we have some technical difficulties this evening in the chamber. So the microphones on all of the seats are not working tonight, but those members due to speak should have a portable microphone in front of you, and for members of the public in the gallery, we'll be handing around microphones as usual. And finally, when we break for the adjournment, please do just be mindful of social distancing as you're moving around the building. So agenda item 2, apologies for absence. I firstly received apologies from the Mayor, who is in Glasgow this week attending COP26, and Deputy Mayor Councillor Craig Cheney is here with us today standing in. I've also received apologies from Councillors Godwin and Jackson. Do we have any other apologies? Councillor Pearce.
Yes, sorry about that, Lord Mayor. Failure to comply there. Councillor Bradshaw.
Thank you very much.
Us this evening.
We'll note that one. Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any interest to declare that relate to any items on today's agenda? Seeing no hands. Okay. Oh, no. No, sorry, you put your hand up, no problem. Right, in that case, agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. There are 2 sets of minutes included with the papers for this meeting. We've been asked to clarify the attendance of the meeting on the 12th of October, prior to agreement, so those minutes will not be proposed for approval at this meeting. They'll come back for approval at the December meeting once we've clarified that and made sure that they are accurate. So I move that the minutes of the full council held on the 7th of September are approved today as a correct record. Do I have a seconder for that?
Seconded, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Then those minutes are approved as a correct record. And we move to agenda item 5, which is Lord Mayor's business. I have one item of business to share with members, which is, as hopefully everyone is aware, our annual Remembrance Sunday parade and service will be taking place this Sunday, 14th of November, at the Cenotaph. We will have military units, cadet contingents, veterans and other groups assembling outside on College Green to march down to the Cenotaph for the service. All councillors are invited and encouraged to take part if you're not taking part in services in your own wards. And members of the public are also welcome to come and witness the occasion. And now, because today is our nearest full council meeting to Remembrance Sunday, I'm going to ask members to observe 1 minute's silence today to pay our respects to those who have fallen in conflict. And members may also wish to take the opportunity to reflect on the murder of MP Sir David Amos on the 15th of October. So can I ask members please to stand and observe a minute's silence? Thank you. We now move to agenda item 6, which is public forum. And we have 30 minutes allowed for public forum to cover petitions and statements as well as questions. Details of all petitions, statements and questions that we've received for this meeting have been published on the website. And I will go through the list, calling first on those members of the public who have indicated to us that they plan to attend the meeting. If you're speaking, you will have 1 minute to speak. The traffic lights on the front of the desk here will be working, so if you've got a green light, it means you've got plenty of time. It will turn amber towards the end of your time, and if it turns red, it means that your minute is over. So please do pay attention to that so we have time for everyone else to get in. First of all, we've received one public petition for this meeting, which should be displayed on the screen. And I will Hannah Summers to speak to the petition for 1 minute. Hannah, are you with us? No? Okay, well, the petition has been received and will be noted in any case. So we will move to statements that have been received from members of the public. We received a total of 42 public statements, the list of which are appearing on the screen now, and 6 people have indicated to us that they want to speak to their statements, and those are indicated on the list, and we'll run through those people in order. So I'll invite each person to speak to the statements for 1 minute. Please do bear in mind that the statements have been distributed and read by all councillors, so you don't need to read it verbatim to us, so please use your 1 minute to summarise the key points. And first, do we have Jen Smith? Jen. Thank you, Jen. You have 1 minute.
Bristol Send is seriously under-resourced, and that's the only reason I can make from a response to a complaint I made to the council after waiting 6 weeks to someone to reply to an urgent email. The email was regarding my child having no education since the first week of September, and he doesn't now. I wrote in my statement that no matter how many boxes the council rag-rate green for scrutiny commissions regarding unlawfully late EHCPs, we will not put up with it. But today the council Facebooked their latest report on the progress they have made against its written statement of action. Under the lack of accountability of leaders at all levels, including school leaders, it says families report increased satisfaction with Bristol Send processes and provision, so it's been rag-rated green. Fact is, Bristol City Council acts unlawfully with regard to its SEND duties around education, SEND and SEND FOIs. And there's an element of persecution from the Education Department for those who stand up in public and say that it's not right and expose this. Why do we have a mayor putting Bristol on the world stage when children aren't being educated and then that's now being marked green for good? It's not on.
Thank you very much, Jen. The next person who's indicated they wish to speak is Alan Morris. Alan. Alan, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm speaking to you on behalf of Bristol Walking Alliance. We have today launched a booklet called 50 Ways to Walking, and I'm just speaking in person to alert you to it. And it's good to be able to do that in person. The booklet contains a list of 50 actions to make walking safer and more pleasant and more inclusive. Today's full council meeting is an opportunity to present it to all the councillors gathered here today. You should be receiving a hard copy today. Each councillor may have already received it. It's appropriate that we're launching this during COP26 because, as well as being good for us, walking is the ultimate in low-carbon activity. If we're not careful, walking can be the Cinderella in transport schemes because it is taken for granted. So a key ask of the council is to commit to a specific budget for walking and to commit to measuring and increasing walking levels. But it isn't only transport schemes that affect the environment for walking. For instance, bins on pavements. What we are saying via this document is the council could reappraise how much more it could do by involving all the council teams that have an impact on the environment for walking to think about it more holistically. We in BDBO will be using the document over coming weeks and months. I commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. I see several members who've got the booklet in their hand. I know mine arrived today, so thank you. We move to public statement number 38. Stephanie Spiteri on behalf of Bristol Sex Workers Collective. Stephanie, are you with us? Hi. Stephanie, you have 1 minute.
In 2018, the Council wished to review their SEV policy and so carried out a survey, finding that 2/3 of respondents were comfortable with SEVs in Bristol. Avon and Somerset Police's cumulative impact assessment also showed that neither SEVs currently open are a threat to the safety of Bristol residents. A significant number of the workers are members of the UVW union and members of Equity. This allows us to organise and ensure fair working conditions, which we would be unable to do should our work be pushed underground. USW has also worked to create progressive SEV policy in Camden and Edinburgh, and there is an opportunity for Bristol to do the same. In Swansea, Chester and Exeter, cities which have nil caps, there was no impact on reducing violence against women and girls, and the rates of sexual assault actually increased in the years following the nil caps. And there was a similar trend in Bristol and Jack of Diamonds, a strip club in Old Market that lost its licence in 2017. As our open letter suggests, we also have several gender research experts agreeing that SEVs should remain open, as well as several trade unions and academics. Our public petition has also reached almost 7,000 signatures. The proposal to place a nil cap in Bristol is clearly not coming from an objective standpoint. Often our voices can go unheard due to the stigma which surrounds our work, but now we're raising our voices and imploring you not to ignore us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And we move to public statement 39, Barry Cash on Bristol Energy. Barry, are you with us? No? Okay, in which case we'll move to public statement 40, John Tarleton on replacement trees. John, you have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. When is a replacement tree not a replacement tree? Current planning policies require that if trees are lost as part of a development, replacement trees are planted nearby. There is, however, a loophole in this compensation process. There is no obligation to actually plant any trees, but merely that the developer pays the cost. In many cases, there are no sites available for the replacement trees, and the money languishes in the council's Section 106 account. An example is Baltic Wharf, where developers promised to plant 162 trees, but there are currently no sites available. This is not a one-off, as there are over £500,000 of unspent Section 106 compensation payments. In the spirit of the ecological emergency, we ask the Council to close this loophole by making it a requirement for developers to identify specific tree replacement sites and ensure that the compensation required by planning policy results in trees planting and not simply swelling the Council's unused Section 106 account. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to public statement 41, David Redwell on the corporate city plan. There you go.
I suppose the issue I have with the corporate city plan really is the lack of accountability and responsibility for transport. When you read the section, it doesn't actually explain about delivery. And of course, delivery is now with the West of England Combined Authority and the Metro Mayor for most transport projects in the city region. But also, we're not in a position as Bristol City Council to deliver rail projects. That's Network Rail Western Routes. If we want to work with the bus company, that's Stagecoach and First. And if we want to bring in very large projects like Temple Meads, it's certainly the Department for Transport. So whatever the problem is, it doesn't explain to the people of Bristol and Greater Bristol and the city region who takes responsibility. And a delivery plan needs to take responsibility. Because I've got stacks of books on my shelves of plans in Bristol that simply haven't happened. And I know Marvin Rees wants to move transport forward, and so does Dan Norris. And we certainly need to sort out Wecker and Bristol. Quicker the better. I'll say that. I'll say that tonight. Lock them in the room as soon as possible and sort it. But we've got to have delivery, which actually can be for the people. And we must have reliability of when we're going to put that metro bus route in, or when we're going to Portway Station. Or when
David, can you draw to a conclusion, please?
Yeah, we're going to bring the Portishead line in, or when we're simply going to deliver Metro West and the showcase bus routes. There must be targets and dates, and that's what we've not got at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I understand public statement 42. Ron Pegley is... Ron, are you with us? Excellent. Ron, just wait for a microphone to come to you. Just, Ron, let a microphone come to you, because... Yes, but people at home can't if they're on YouTube. Well, we do, so please use the microphone, Ron.
You go on then. All right.
Thank you very much.
Right, I've lived in Spike Island, Bordet War for 35 to 40 years. I've been a trade union member for 50 years. Why cut down trees when they're just doing their job? Why evict caravan club from the caravan site? It's a form of Ratnism. And you know what Peter Ratnism was? He was a landlord, a notorious landlord in London. He kicked out the tenants when they were not paying enough money. And that's what you're doing. You want to kick out the caravan club, build luxury flats, get more money, the land will be sold off, end of the jewel of the Western Harbour. I watch that river rise every day, twice a day. It's getting higher and higher. You should be getting the Bristol defences for flood sorted out before large areas of the inner city is flooded. That's it. I don't want to say no more.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. That covers everyone who told us they were coming. Is there anybody else who has submitted a public statement who is here and would like to speak to it? No. Okay, in which case we will move on to the public questions. Again, the list of questions received has been published and should be appearing on the screen. We've received 35 questions from 22 different people, 10 of whom have indicated that they intend to be here today and ask the question. So we're going to run through those in order. When I call you, I'm going to ask each person, please, to read your question out, and then the Deputy Mayor or the relevant Cabinet member will reply verbally, and you'll then have the opportunity to ask one supplementary question for each of the questions that you have submitted. So we'll start with public question number 1, Dougal McNaughton. Dougal, are you with us? So,
that's better. Okay, while the residents of Ashley Street BS2 understand the need for new housing to be built, and we have been broadly supportive of the Brooks Dye Works housing development in St Werburgh's, we are nevertheless concerned that with new houses being built directly on Ashley Street requiring parking not provided by the developers, the overflow from visitors to the new development, and the continuing demand from visitors to the Ashley Street Park, Minor Road Park and nearby shops, it is likely that we will soon face the prospect of parking being unavailable to us in our own street and the surrounding area. Naturally, many of us need to be able to drive for work, to transport children and adults with limited mobility who live in Ashley Street, and also for more day-to-day uses. Can a residence parking scheme, therefore, please be considered for Ashley Street BS2?
Thanks for your question, David. Delivering housing on brownfield sites is very important for ensuring we meet our housing need while protecting our green spaces. Housing developments are required to provide adequate parking for the residents that will be accommodated by the housing. We will not be installing resident parking zones except where there is overwhelming local support, and this can be harnessed through your local councillors. That said, our direction of travel is against residents' parking schemes and towards livable neighbourhoods, particularly in central areas where we want to reduce reliance on cars.
Your question? Yeah.
yes, you can.
So I didn't quite catch, how do I demonstrate overwhelming local support for that? Because I have it.
Through your local council, work with your local councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Public question 2 is from Salem Bennett on plant-based food systems for schools. Salem. If you could summarise your written question first, please, and then we'll have an answer.
Okay, I'll try to. Summary is that I'm here to ask the City Council to start talking with ProVeg. I'll go on to the full question now. My name is Salem, and I'm here to talk to you about helping schools to transition towards a more plant-based food system. We were the first city to declare a climate emergency. Thanks to Carlo Degna, we are now known as a progressive city who leads the way on issues related to the climate crisis. COP26 is coming to an end, and as a city, it would do wonders if we can say we are leading on this too. The agricultural industry is a leading cause of the climate crisis, and in our One Climate City strategy, Bristol City Council set an objective to move the city towards more plant-based diets. But what action can the council take? ProVeg are a leading food awareness organisation who offer a package of free support, helping councils and caterers introduce more plant-based food into their menus. When Leeds City Council was supported by ProVeg, they successfully included 2 vegetarian days in all their 182 primary schools. We are now speaking to over 20 local authorities across the country, and many are interested in making changes. We asked the Mayor if you would be willing to engage with ProVeg, who advised the council for free on how we can transition the Bristol education system towards a more plant-based food system. Thank you. And I guess not the Mayor, the person who's speaking in charge of him.
Thanks for your question, Salem. Feeding children and ensuring all families have access to nutritious and healthy food is a priority for this administration, and we have led action through Feeding Bristol and Your Holiday Hub to deliver nutritious meals for children across the city in and out of school terms. BCC was a lead partner in Bristol's successful bid to achieve Sustainable Food Places Gold Award for the city this year. We are continuing to be an active member of the city's food partnership and will soon be developing a One City Good Food Plan 2030 to A, deliver the food goals in the One City Plan, and B, support our response to the climate and ecological emergencies. Marvin signed the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration on behalf of Bristol in December 2020. These preceding points should provide reassurance that as an organisation we fully recognise the significance of our food system in relation to the climate emergency and are working hard to take appropriate action. That said, schools have delegated responsibility over their budgets and are best placed to know the needs of their students and their local community. So whilst we'll be happy to broker those conversations, I can't promise anything now.
Can I ask a
follow-up
question?
Yeah.
Okay, so all that's great, but all we're asking for now is for you to open dialogue with ProVeg and also to talk to schools and help them to establish those connections with ProVeg. We're not asking for any commitments to any particular, like having 2 plant-based days or 1 plant-based day, etc. We just want to open that dialogue. So would you be open to talking with ProVeg and introducing the schools to ProVeg?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that is what I offered to broker that conversation. Of course, there are other organisations that do the same thing, so we can't be, exclusive.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We'll move then to public question number 3 from David Wiley on seagulls. David, are you with us? No? Okay, so we'll move to public questions 4 and 5, which is Peter Beard on tree inspection reports. Peter. No? Okay, then public questions 6 and 7, Elvira Kojor on parking situation on Passage Road. Nope. Okay, next we have public questions numbers 20 and 21. David Redgewell, I know you're here, David. Oh, there we go. We've got a microphone for you.
Thank you. Well, my first question is about the West of England Combined Authority, and it's to Marvin, but he's not here tonight. So I just want to know, as does the transport user groups and the transport trade unions, when we're going to start talking and holding meetings of the West of England Combined Authority and the Joint Committee, and what progress is being made with Kevin Guy, Toby Savage, Don Davis, and the Mayor to make sure that we have meetings so we can spend public money on public transport, railways and services that the people of Greater Bristol deserve. And the other point I'd make, Grant Shapps has made very, very clear, the only game in town for public money, for transport, is through a combined authority elected Metro Mayor. And if you don't believe me, please check with the North East of England Combined Authority, who were given no money because they did not have a combined authority Metro Mayor elected. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. There are issues, obviously, with the way the Joint Committee works, and the unitary authorities are looking at a revised constitution to ensure it continues to operate successfully. The WECA meeting was postponed due to problems with the Joint Committee. This was then rescheduled to the 5th of November, but the WECA Mayor is not available until December the 3rd, when the WECA meeting will go ahead as usual. You have identified a number of transport challenges and initiatives here, and we appreciate your attention to these issues as always. Thank you.
Dave, do you want to ask a follow-up to that first question?
Yeah, there is, and I've written to the Chief Executive today, so we must see this email. We have a supported bus service consultation which is not at the moment out on the streets, Mike. It's just not there. It's not with the public. It's not on the buses. I've raised it with Don. I know he's picking it up as well. But can we have assurances that the supported bus service, to which there's 110 services running to some of our most deprived communities, both in Bristol and in South Gloucestershire and Baines. I would ask if Marvin, well, ask Deputy Mayor now, along with Asher, if we could possibly extend this consultation with the Metro Mayor to the 20th of December so that disability and equality groups I've been with today can have a chance to take place and we can have a proper consultation and perhaps we can get it raised at this board meeting when it happens. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of the Wycombe Mayor in particular, but we can definitely ask him what we can do to help support that consultation, and we can also raise the question about extending the date. Obviously, it's not our consultation to change in that way, but we can certainly ask.
Okay, thank you. So, David, I think that was your first question, number 20.
Yeah, my second question always interests everybody in Greater Bristol, and particularly the stakeholders in transport. I think we'd all like to know now where we are with the second devolution debate with government on funding for transport with Geraint Shapps and with Michael Gove, and how we actually go forward with that to get the powers that Greater Manchester's got and the powers that Liverpool City region's got and the West Midlands have got, so we actually catch up and includes things about railway executives, more powers, transferring all the officers that work on public transport in this building should now be at Wecker and in Baines and in South Gloucestershire. So I suppose that's the question. And then the other question is we support the transport user groups, as you all know, and stakeholders, the bringing in of North Somerset Council into Wecker as soon as possible in terms of a shadow authority. Can we know what progress is now happening on the governance review, which I know Marvin's very keen on, and then what's going to happen about bringing in North Somerset Council, which should, of course, be a member of WECA, as Toby Savage said to me in Cabinet yesterday?
Yeah, so, I mean, the short answer is that we're working on that governance review. The timeline is complicated by the current sort of impasse, I suppose, but we are working on that governance review at the moment. We've also we've exchanged correspondence with Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, about the investment needed for Bristol and onward to the Western Gateway.
Thank you. David, do you have any further follow-up to that? Oh, okay. Can we get, David does have one more follow-up question, so yeah there we go.
I just, Craig made the point. So I suppose the other issue is about what we're doing to beef up the Western Gateway partnership. And the leader of Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch was in touch with me a few weeks ago because we don't have contiguous boundaries between the partnership and the Transport Board. And I know the Transport Partnership want that looked at. So I wonder if we could work to see if we could find, because we do need a strong sub-regional transport board, as the Deputy Mayor has made clear. And that includes Swindon becoming a member.
Yeah, absolutely. We can look at that. I mean, we held a very useful summit of the Western Gateway here a couple of weeks ago. Lots of these things were addressed, so we'll definitely look at that, David.
Thank you very much. So we move on now to questions 22 and 23. Rob Breyer. Is Rob with us? There we are. So, Rob, if you could just ask your first question first, we'll get an answer, and then you can do your follow-up.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. At the Cabinet meeting of 22nd of June 2021, I asked when the Citizens' Assembly tracker of recommendations and proposed actions would be made available to the public, and the best route for the public to take if it turns out the recommendations haven't been acted upon. The response was that the tracker is a live working document, and to ensure full visibility of progress, it will be appended to 6 monthly progress updates that will be available on the Bristol Citizens' Assembly web pages, and the first of these updates is scheduled for September 2021. It's now November 2021. I've checked the Citizens' Assembly web page, and there has been no update and no tracker for these actions has been included on that web page. Please could you state when and whether we will be updated about the progress of the Citizens' Assembly recommendations and which are or are not being taken forward and acted upon?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly have been carefully considered as part of the evidence base for the updated corporate strategy, the draft of which was approved by Cabinet on the 2nd of November and will proceed to full Council in December with a recommendation for approval. Further action planning continues as part of the Council's annual service and business planning process, looking forward to 2022-23 actions. Because of the timescales of these pieces of work, we have postponed a formal update report on the Citizens' Assembly actions so that we can present greater clarity about how and where recommendations were or were not being addressed. Given our current work on future planning and dealing with our budget challenges, the teams who work on these updates are exceptionally busy. I have asked that they bring an update in the new year so that we do not lose sight of progress on these actions and are transparent about what is being done.
Okay, thanks for that response, Craig. I think that for me it's a matter of urgency to keep people updated on these because there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So I guess my question is, with that update in, did you say January or December?
New year, yeah.
New year, okay. So is that January? That's my question. Is that January?
Yes, January, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
I mean, the problem here is that the team that work on the Citizens' Assembly are very small because, of course, we've spent 12 years of austerity, which have left us with a reduced team for things like consultation and so on. So it is very difficult for them to maybe be on top of it as they should.
Okay. I think that's the follow-up and an answer on the first question. Do you want to move on to your second question, Rob?
I also asked in June 2021 at the Cabinet about the recommendation to appoint a champion to work with the chair of the One City Transport Board to have responsibility for these recommendations with a focus on accessibility in local communities. I was told that, like the other recommendations, this has not yet been acted upon and to wait for the update. I was later told an email from Councillor Don Alexander on 6th of September this year that we will discuss with the One City Transport Board and council colleagues how best to approach the recommendation for a champion to monitor progress towards these goals. We will share information about any appointment process that may be agreed in due course. I was also told in subsequent emails that there was no process in place for me to join the One City Transport Board to contribute to this work, and we're reviewing the One City Transport Board and the way it works. When I asked, no completion date for this review was given, and a subsequent email asking for a contact person for the One City Transport Board was not given by Councillor Alexander. How does someone actively working in transport in Bristol apply to be on the One City Transport Board? And when will the One City Transport Board and council colleagues make a decision about whether to appoint a champion to monitor progress towards the Citizens' Assembly transport recommendations?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So the One City Transport Board is being reviewed alongside all the other boards, actually, and that's obviously not an insignificant job as we rethink memberships and so on. It's a big task. So that's being looked at the moment. Don, I don't know if you want to comment specifically on the champion. I would suspect that that's a One City Transport Board decision. So there's a workshop in 10 days' time for those that can't hear. Okay. So the board will come together and come up with a recommendation to meet that recommendation.
So I suppose my supplementary question is, you're meeting in a workshop to decide who will be part of this. Do you think that you could make the process for this a lot more accountable so that someone can apply to be involved in this stuff? Because there's lots of people involved in the transport and climate and lots of different groups in Bristol who would be really valuable partners for the One City process and the council generally. And it feels like there isn't a way for us to be involved. I would at this point ask the general question, can I be the champion? Because like what do you need a champion to be? I have no idea. So I'm putting myself forward to be the champion to look at the Citizens' Assembly recommendations and make sure they're being acted upon.
I'm not going to agree on behalf of the One City Transport Board to make you the representative of what's sitting here today. I will let them make that decision themselves. We would usually invite people to be on that board.
Thank you. We've got just a few minutes to take the final question that I believe people are here for. Questions 27 and 28. Michelle Morris. Michelle, are you here? Evening, Michelle. Do you want to read your first question first? We'll get an answer and then a supplementary.
Okay, a safe play park setting for adults with disabilities and their carers would enhance their mental health and would help enormously with exercise, improving health issues and the challenges they face with loneliness. Is this something you could help with?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so we are committed that all public spaces, amenities and activities in Bristol should be accessible and welcoming to people with disabilities. I guess there's been a question about whether that should be in a segregated space or not, and that's a conversation that I think we need to have, and of course we will come to in part of the petition debate later.
Thank you. Would you like to ask any further supplementary question on that? Michelle, I know you're presenting your petition shortly anyway.
The only second question was if you thought that you could help do this, what would be the timescale on it?
I suppose we'll come to that at the end of the debate when we see where we've got to with that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That concludes the questions received from members of the public and concludes the public forum agenda item. So we move to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors, and we have 2 councillor petitions received for this meeting. I'll ask each councillor to present their petition for 1 minute, starting with Councillor Hartley on Baltic Wharf. Councillor Hartley, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Over 600 people have now signed our petition calling on the area of Baltic Wharf to be put back into the Western Harbour regeneration area. This area is now almost entirely within flood risk level 3, meaning risk of death to all. The overdevelopment will result in the loss of 100 mature trees, and the ongoing planning application has had over 400 objections, including from the Environment Agency. I hope all councillors who at last full council voted to end building on green space will watch this development closely, as we are seeing the council-run housing company Gorham Homes failing to listen to local residents' legitimate concerns. Why the Baltic Wharf site is not part of the latest Western Harbour engagement process is beyond me, but the harbour area must be thought of as a whole rather than looking at piecemeal plots. As Cabinet Member Nicola Beach recently tweeted, only 7% of the harbour side is open green space, so I question why Bristol City Council is so determined to classify the area as brownfield when it has over 100 mature trees and 124 metres of ecologically rich hedgerows. Local people understand the need for development in the area, but are concerned that they're being ignored. Given the ecological emergency and the desire to double the tree canopy, we must prioritise sustainable developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hartley. And I now ask Councillor Weston to present your petition, please, for 1 minute.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. It's actually not my petition. I've been asked to present it on behalf of the residents of Passage Road. The petition reads, we, the undersigned, call on the Council to stop the installation of boulders on the Passage Road open space and enter into serious dialogue with residents to either install a spine road or sell a strip of the land to residents to allow them to install it themselves. This area of Brentry is already overwhelmed with parked cars. The spine road will allow residents to make use of the low-value scrubland to park in their front gardens. Preston will force even more cars into crowded side streets. Now is the time for dialogue rather than arbitrary action. It's signed by 30 residents, which is every house facing it, and I thank the Mayor's office for reaching out already on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we move to agenda item number 8, which is a petition debate on disabled adult play parks. This is a petition which has reached or exceeded the 3,500 signature threshold to qualify for a full council debate, and 20 minutes is allocated for that debate. The petition organiser will be given 5 minutes to present the petition and its objectives. We'll then proceed to a councillor debate, and I will also ask the Deputy Mayor or relevant Cabinet Member to respond at the end. This will be a councillor debate. It's not an interactive debate involving the public. The issues raised in the petition and the comments made during the debate will be referred to the Mayor and relevant Cabinet Member. So the petition organisers are Karina Andrews and Michelle Morris. And can I ask Karina and Michelle, please, to present your petition? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm Karina Andrews, and along with Michelle Morris, I'm here to present this petition to you all. This petition has been put forward on behalf of the 17% of the Bristol population who are registered as disabled adults, and that was taken from the census 2011, so many more now, I suspect. We are asking for everybody to help create a safe, fun, accessible and life-changing disabled adult play park. Within Bristol, we know of many fun, accessible environments for disabled children, but when you are a young person who becomes an adult, your options are extremely limited, especially if you have a severe disability and challenging behaviour. I run a project called Invisible Army, which shines a light on carers unpaid. During this project, I have collected many stories about life as a carer. Many of the carers say that they mostly stay at home within the same four walls due to limited access to safe, understanding places to visit. They know that if they take their loved ones to a play park, there is a risk that they may receive verbal abuse from other people at the park. There are hundreds of real people trapped in their homes, often deteriorating as the world is not designed for them. A comment on our petition states, "This is so needed. I also have a 24-year-old ASD daughter who would love to go to the park on a more regular basis, but now won't go out at all because of the comments, laughs and stares."
Raising my son, Declan, for 28 years has been extremely challenging. My son is 6'5" and has very complex needs. I have to do everything for him, personal care, feed him, and most importantly, keep him safe. This is extremely difficult while out in the community. But we all know that disabled people need to be out in the community. As a carer, it's hard to make friends, as we're always looking after our loved ones. Often I don't speak to anybody all week, which I've noticed has had an impact on my communication skills. If we could be somewhere where we know they are safe, we could have the opportunity to chat to other people and share useful information about things that are troubling us. I wanted to campaign for a disabled adult play park for everyone experiencing the same issues I am dealing with. I think it's hard to explain the difficulties involved in caring for a 28-year-old with complex needs in a home environment, let alone out in the community. The petition comments showed many carers have similar experiences, and it's just going to improve mental health and lots of other things.
So one story from an autistic adult described how she goes to the park to go on the swing before she goes to bed in order to clear her head. On occasions, the police have been called. The list of benefits is endless. Here are a few. Exercise. One comment from a GP states, "This would be amazing. I hope Bristol City Council take the lead on this. As a doctor, I say that the lack of exercise and obesity can have severe problems in growing adults with learning difficulties. So somewhere to let off steam and have fun would be invaluable both to their mental and physical health. It could improve mental health, a community for disabled adults and their carers, coming out of isolation, especially after COVID, job and volunteer opportunities such as caring for the park, garden, and potential cafe, a sense of development, release and safety, respite for carers, reduce loneliness, increase people coming into Bristol, lower discrimination against disabled adults, and accessible equipment and change in places." 53,501 people have signed the petition, including 3,060 from Bristol. We would like to know how and in what timescale you can help us with the idea so that disabled people and their carers can have a better quality of life. Some further comments from our petition from people of Bristol. As a parent of my son with autism, we are always being marginalised by Bristol City Council. Their inclusivity is so far removed from reality. I have a son who is 15 and already 5'11" and wears size 11 shoes. He has autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, picker, and severe learning difficulties. We can't play anywhere, soft plays are too small, parks have unlocked gates, and open spaces are full of people who look down on Matthew because he's different. It would be so helpful for him and therefore me to have somewhere to go and let off steam. Another comment, "This would be amazing. I hope Bristol City Council take the lead on..." Oh, read that one already. I work with children and young people with additional needs, including autism. However, I work in South Gloucestershire because there is barely anything in Bristol. I am constantly shocked at how little Bristol provides children, young people and their families, as well as even more so for adults. It sounds like more needs to be done to connect families, but if a specific play park is what is needed, then let's start here. There are similar play parks in South Gloucestershire, and there's so many more other comments from our Bristol residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Karina and Michelle, for presenting your petition. We're now going to move to the councillor debate, and I'll call Councillor Massey to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor Massey, you have 3 minutes. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, a little technical difficulty.
Obviously, technology is against us today, but...
It definitely is tonight, yeah. And can I start by saying thank you for that really eye-opening introduction to your petition. We really appreciate hearing it. Normally, when we get up and talk about play parks, we usually think about school-age children. But tonight, I'm speaking in support of the request for provision of dedicated play facilities for disabled adults with both physical and mental challenges. It can be very difficult, as we've heard, for families to cope with the issues that arise when their adult son or daughter has severe learning disabilities and challenging behaviour. But physical activity can help to release some of this tension, and the benefit gained by using the play equipment can have a calming impact on behavioural issues. Previously, access to play areas has been granted for only 1 hour early on Sunday mornings, but even that proved difficult to manage. And without appropriate adult play facilities, it's often the case that the public misunderstand the situation if the general play areas are used, and this has, as we've heard, unfortunately resulted in calls to the police. Weight problems can also be aggravated by lack of physical activity, which could be helped by regular exercise in a safe environment. It could also provide a way for carers to meet together in a supportive way whilst their children are safely occupied. A few weeks ago, we voted for extra funding for Blaze nurseries, and at the time I put forward a request that people with learning difficulties could be encouraged to work in the shop. The same could also happen if we had a cafe in a park, and also learning how to look after the grounds there. We do understand the frustration of families who would benefit from a dedicated play space. But although we're in favour of this request and can see how helpful it would be, we're currently extremely restricted by funding considerations. However, I do hope that there will be cross-party support for us to work together and determine if there are any alternative sources of funding that may be available to achieve the outcome we need. And can I finish by saying thank you very much for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Bartle to speak on behalf of the Green Group. 3 minutes.
Is it working? Yes. The statements we've heard so far have been really inspiring and really show how this could help not just the autistic community, but carers and actually those who might not even know they're neurodiverse. It's about improving access to the carefree, frivolous joy of play and the benefits it brings to our bodies and minds. Notably, autistic people of all abilities have a common need that a swing specifically can go a really long way to fulfilling. Repetitive bodily movements, known as stimming, are a key aspect of many autistic people's experience. And there's often a catch-22 for autistic people who need to stim in order to function socially, but their stimming itself is negatively socially judged. Play equipment like swings is a great way around that problem because you can stim and socialise at the same time. Furthermore, the central idea here, providing free, casual outside leisure opportunities, is a moral and civic good. I can't be the only person who's fed up of going on a walk to the park, walking around the park and thinking, I wish I had a reason to stay in the park just a bit longer. As adults, we're starved of unstructured outdoor activities. We do have some facilities across the city, but there's certainly scope for more and certainly scope for better accessibility. Something I think we're all quite interested as councillors is public realm improvements. And this idea to me seems like a great example of a relatively simple, cost-effective way to make a really meaningful impact on people's lives. And I'm sure many of us can think of several places in our wards where it would really transform a space. If we want to be an inclusive city, we need to design usable public spaces that don't have the stress of loud children running about, where solo adults of all genders can feel like they're allowed to go, and where you can be publicly autistic without feeling judged. So I really hope members will consider this petition earnestly and investigate how we can integrate more play equipment for adults into our open spaces in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Lord Mayor, when petitions reach 3,500 signatures and come to here for debate, it's customary to congratulate the organisers. In this case, our sincere thanks should go to the two tremendous ladies who've organised this, and we've just had given impassioned speeches. Their case convincingly convinced me that the words of their petition are very much from the heart, and we should listen and pay attention to them. Tory councillors on these benches will certainly be supporting this bid. It is appalling to think that parents like the ladies we've just heard have to travel all the way to Wootton-under-Edgell, perhaps in South Gloucestershire, to enjoy a disabled adult play space. Surely it is not beyond the ability of this council to provide one facility in North Bristol and another in South Bristol. It seems to me that one or two of our existing destination parks may be appropriate. The availability of convenient car parking nearby has to be essential too. The availability of public toilet space is equally important. I genuinely hope the Mayor's Cabinet progresses this petition's very reasonable goals. And we should thank again the organisers of this petition for their hard work and dedication in bringing this here today.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Kent to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Kent, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, thank you for bringing this petition. 50,000 signatures is an amazing achievement. I think that's probably the highest we've ever seen here in this chamber. I know how important this issue is. A resident in my own ward had approached me recently to raise the negative impact the loss of the swings at Victoria Park had on him and his adult son. You made a really strong and compelling case about why this provision is needed. I think the problem, though, sometimes you find, especially with this chamber, with politicians, is you'll get lots of warm words, but will you get any action? And I don't want to put a downer here today, but I think don't be fooled by politicians' warm words. Actually find out what they're willing to follow that up with, and will that be action? So we had a debate here in this chamber in February about putting substantial extra funding into play parks. Labour members decided to put it down. In February, when the budget comes back, maybe additional capital, and then maybe used to try to push that forward. But as a councillor for Hengrove and Whitchurch Park, I'll be happy to help with you to see whether we can help you find provision in the south of the city. I'm afraid we can't help directly with the north of the city, but we would certainly be willing to work with you to try to make something really happen here in Bristol. Hopefully, I hope that other councillors from other groups will back up their warm words with action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Cheney, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, as always, Tim's managed to turn what was a reasonably pleasant and well thought through debate into a bit of a one-sided ping pong that was unnecessary, really. That said, I mean, I think you heard cross-party support for this, the details of this petition, and I want to ask our cabinet member Ellie, who's the cabinet member for Parks, to come back to you with a response to the petition and what we might be able to do about that. You don't need to do that now, Ellie. That's just the general. So we'll come back to you. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'll now ask Council to note the issues raised in the petition, together with the comments made during the debate, which will be referred to the Mayor and to the relevant Cabinet member, and a response will be issued to you. We now move then to agenda item 9, which is the report from the new Disability Equality Commission. And I welcome Alan Davis to the meeting, who is Chair of the Commission. Alan, would you like to speak to the report? Okay, can we get a microphone for Alan, please? It should be on its way to you. There we go. Alan, welcome to Council. Please do speak to your report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, councillors. It's 16 years since I made my last speech in this chamber, and while I was by no means the best councillor ever, and probably the least effective, what that opportunity I had representing Frome Vale, the electorate who elected me to represent them, gave me the opportunity to serve this city. And that, for me, was the greatest honour and privilege I've had, to put something back into a city that's given me so much. And that's one of the reasons why I put my name forward and applied to be chair of the Disability Equality Commission. The other reason, of course, is to try and play my own part and make a difference in dealing with the challenges that disabled people in this city face. And we've heard some of them this evening. We've heard of the difficulties and challenges in the special education system. We have heard of the lack of inclusive play provision for disabled adults. We have heard of issues and challenges in the transport system. We know of the challenges faced by people with autism and people who experience neurodiversity and people with learning difficulties that were highlighted in the Bubb report. We know of the lack of accessible housing. We know of the rising increase in disability hate crime in this city. I could go on with listing the challenges. Why I applied to be chair of the Disability Equality Commission is to be part of bringing solutions to those challenges. It's not going to be easy. I'm saying to disabled people since I was appointed, there are no miracles here. There are no magic wands that can be waved on any of these issues. But I would not have applied for this if I did not believe that the one city wanted change. Why appoint a commission if you don't want to do something about it? And that's not just the council, that's across the city. The city council is one part of one city. The issues that disabled people face in this city, and by that I mean disabled people who experience neurodiversity, who experience mental health issues, who experience learning difficulties, who have physical issues, who have mental challenges, and who have sensory impairments. What we all face, and also from different communities, black disabled people, lesbian, gay men, lesbians, gay, bisexual and transgender, working class disabled people, disabled women, what we all face is challenges that we can only address together. We can only do that through collaboration. We can only do that through partnership. I am in the process of trying to recruit a commission to represent and reflect all those different needs of disabled people. Please promote the recruitment process to your colleagues, your electorate. Please help us put together a team of disabled people that can not only help build this city back better, but build it back equally and build it back fairly. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. I'll now call Councillor Goggin to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to place on record how glad I am that Alan Davis has been made the chair. While I do not know him personally, I've heard from many colleagues how dedicated he is to improving the lives for those with visual impairments across the city. I would also like to thank Asher for chairing the steering group until Alan was appointed. Disabled people have suffered most during the pandemic. There are plenty of grim statistics that highlight how difficult it has been, such as disabled people being over 3 times as likely to die from COVID. Disabled people were more likely to be classed as vulnerable, so spent more time in lockdown than anyone else. Considering the COVID rates in Bristol today, a huge number may still feel nervous about leaving home and going to crowded spaces. So I'd like to take the opportunity to remind people to please, please, please wear masks, even when it's optional. It's reassuring to see 3 items on today's agenda concerning the well-being of disabled people. I say that as a disabled person myself, someone who, like so many others, has an invisible condition. I have bipolar affective disorder. Language is important. I don't suffer from it, and I am not bipolar. There is far more than that defines me. If I came out in spots, I wouldn't say, I am measles. I live with it. It prevents challenges, but at other times it gives me special powers. Not exactly those that can come from being bitten by a radioactive spider, perhaps, but not something I'd be without. As we will discuss later, disabled people have again been badly let down by the government and its national disability strategy, which failed to even consult disabled people, let alone co-design it with them. We all as Bristolians have a part to play to make Bristol a more inclusive city, and that commitment goes far beyond the council. I look forward to the consultation being launched and would strongly encourage everyone in this room to publicise it far and wide. This process is both vitally important and hugely timely. Recent figures show an increase in disability hate crime and a reduction in prosecutions, let alone convictions. Bristol and this administration are at the forefront of fighting discrimination and the struggle for equality for all. Unfortunately, there is one other thing that disproportionately blights those already suffering forms of discrimination, whether ethnicity, ability, sexuality or any other. That additional burden is poverty, something that should have been added to the list of protected characteristics a long time ago. Perhaps that can be our next mayoral commission.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Portley to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased to note the first update from the Disability Equality Commission, and particularly to recognise the relatively newly appointed Chair, Alan Davis. For those newer councillors who don't know Alan, you will. He's given more than 30 years of dedicated advocacy for the rights of disabled people. It is very hard to imagine a more compassionate, thoughtful, diligent person to take on this role. I was recently given the Chair of Public Safety and Protection Committee. I don't think I was in post quite 48 hours before an email arrived from Alan, letting me know that we need to talk about issues facing the visually impaired in using Bristol's taxi fleet. And I was struck, as usual, by the clarity of Alan's advocacy. This was not an ask for general support or some sort of easy statement of shared values. His message was very, very clear. We have a problem. You need to fix it. Here are some ideas. It's easy to welcome these updates with warm words. I genuinely believe there is a desire for fairness and equality that is sincerely felt by every party on this council, but we need to remember that equality is a journey we must always strive to be on. It's a destination that we can never truly reach, and it's a destination whose milestones are measured not by how loudly we proclaim our successes, but how carefully we reflect on our failings. We will always fail a bit, and we must always try to do better, and I'm hopeful this commission will help us do better. The test of us as a council and of this administration is not whether our hearts are in the right place, whether we say the right things when it's easy to do so. The test will be whether we take the right actions when things are more difficult. Will we be listening quite so carefully and supportively when the advice and guidance and scrutiny these commissions offer is inconvenient, when it wants action that will require some real sacrifice? That will be the test. And I hope we can all live up to the values that we've heard expressed in this room today. The people who sit on these commissions give their time freely to make the city better, and we owe them not just warm words, but listening ears and determined action. To make the most of their expertise, we need to ensure their advice reaches and is heeded by every part of this council and reaches beyond it to the city more widely. I, for one, am very much looking forward to working with Alan and the rest of his commission in my small little bit of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call Councillor Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. When I was a newly elected councillor, I was fortunate to have quite a number of the old guard of councillors take me under their wing. One of these was Paul Brown, who was a councillor for Henleys for many years. He was also my planning lead member. More relevant to the Disability Commission, Paul served in Malaya in the 50s when he was a young army officer and sadly contracted polio. This left him with major life-changing difficulties, including affecting his mobility, and towards the end of his life he was in a wheelchair. This did not stop Paul from forging his own successful business achieving human fulfilment, and of course serving his fellow Bristolians on this council. I report Paul telling me that this council usually spoke strongly about its concern for disability issues, but in the 1990s, this building itself was very difficult to get around. Things have hugely improved since, at least physically. Unfortunately, this isn't always the case in other ways. Until very recently, when we had DC agenda conferences, we were squeezed into one of the smallest public rooms on the first floor, even though we included former Councillor Harriet Clough as a wheelchair user and myself with my walking aid. Just over a decade ago, I was granted a privileged insight into disability issues when I had an illness and spent 10 months in NHS care, including 6 months in Frenchay Hospital's Barrow Disability Rehab Centre. My Lord Mayor, isn't it strange the things people will do to avoid coming to full council? Seriously, may I take this opportunity to pay tribute to consultant Angus Ross and the dedicated team of medical and care professionals he has built up at Barrow. Together, they have changed and improved the lives of huge numbers of Bristolians. But they can only do so much. The external challenges are for people like us and Westminster politicians. Finally, may I pay a fulsome tribute to the chairman of the Disability and Equality Commission, Alan Davis. I was first got to know Alan 2 decades ago when he was in this place in a different guise. Alan, in an email exchange following his appointment, if you'll excuse my choice of language, Lord Mayor, Alan accurately admitted we were both obstinate buggers. I feel sure the interests of Bristol's disabled community are in determined and formidable hands under his leadership. Alan, please accept my best wishes for your demanding task ahead.
Thank you. And I call Councillor Varney to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. We were delighted when the establishment of the Mayoral Commission on Disability Equality was announced just over a year ago. It is, of course, right that the Council should focus on this issue, especially as many barriers, both physical and metaphorical, remain in place and prevent equality for those with disabilities. It's also especially important in the wake of the pandemic, in which disabled people have been disproportionately affected. We are pleased to see that progress has been made, firstly with the appointment of Alan Davis as chair this summer. Alan is a passionate advocate for equal rights and opportunities for all disabled people, and we are sure he will do an excellent job in taking this important issue forward. We are also pleased that the Disability Equality Commission will be working closely with the West of England Centre for Inclusive Living, a fantastic organisation based here in Bristol that is dedicated to supporting independent living and to creating a more inclusive society. Together with the Mayoral Commissions on Race and Women, these commissions have an important job to do in ensuring Bristol is and remains an inclusive city where no one faces discrimination or disadvantage based on ability, race or gender. We note that the Commission will shortly begin work on a city-wide consultation to identify priorities and develop a strategic plan. May I humbly suggest that a couple of issues raised here today in this chamber be included in the strategic plan. Firstly, the public petition on disabled adult play parks we heard earlier. The current situation in Bristol is unacceptable, with no dedicated facilities for adults with additional needs, and this must change. Secondly, my own statement earlier on physical barriers on cycle paths that prevent easy access for those in wheelchairs and those using non-standard bicycles. I recognise that council officers would like to remove these barriers, but it's simply not good enough to say no funds are available. We need funding and we need a plan of action. These are just two small examples of changes that could be made to improve the lives of those with disabilities. Finally, the social model of disability states that people are not disabled by their impairments, but by the cultural, economic, physical, political and social structures of society. The Liberal Democrats wish the Commission every success in combating these structures that impair the lives of those with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to conclude the debate, I'll invite Deputy Mayor Councillor Asher Craig to respond as the relevant Cabinet member. Councillor Craig, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Bristol is a city of contradictions. We are one of the most unequal cities in the country, with an increasing gap between the most advantaged and the most disadvantaged. Many of our citizens are struggling on many different fronts: income, housing, education, employment, transport. Disabled people consistently report the lowest quality of life satisfaction rates of all communities within our city. Why? Because there are still too many barriers excluding many disabled people from sharing in Bristol's aspirations, health and well-being, and economic successes. Consequently, our businesses, public bodies, communities, services and service providers are also losing out. Disabled people represent a substantial proportion of the city's potential spending power, or would do if employers were more willing to select them as staff and if the majority of Bristol's shops, entertainment, leisure and transport were accessible. Unemployment among all disabled people with and without qualifications is more than twice that for non-disabled people. Disabled people in work are more than twice as likely as their non-disabled colleagues to be in low-paid work. We have a gross underrepresentation of disabled people in all sector workforces and leadership teams, including service industries, health trusts, schools, head offices, leisure facilities, and local authorities. In 2016, Mayor Rees pledged to establish a Disability Equality Commission. In that same year, the Disability Equality Forum launched its own manifesto, which proposed a number of changes to systems, practices and services that would improve the lives of all disabled people, whatever their impairment or cultural identity here in Bristol. I'm delighted that over the past 12 months, I have been able to work alongside a very representative group of disability organisations, Wessel, Brill, BDEF, Bristol Deaf Centre, to establish the Mayoral Commission on Disability Equality, which, as you've heard, will sit alongside both the Women's Commission and the Race Commission. Here in the Council, we're committed to improving the representation of disabled staff within our workforce. But we, and indeed the city, needs to go further. And that is why we established the Commission on Disability Equality. The role of the Commission is to make a difference to the lives of disabled people by ensuring disability equality is embedded in policy and practice across the city. I'm absolutely delighted that following a very rigorous recruitment process, that Alan was unanimously selected to become the new chair of the Commission. Alan will lead the establishment, development and delivery of the new Commission, which is currently recruiting new commissioners. The Disability Equality Commission may be a mayoral commission, but it will focus on the whole city, not just the council, and therefore it will be firmly rooted within the One City approach and strategy.
Councillor Craig, can you wind up now, please? Thank you.
I just want to end by reminding Alan of the vision that he set out in his interview for the Commission, a vision that I know both myself and the Mayor and other disabled organisations support. In that vision, you said, disabled people from all backgrounds and impairments working together through collaboration and partnership to make Bristol a city where disabled people can live with choice, control, equality and opportunity. I share that vision with you, and I look forward to working with you over the coming months and years. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Alan, all the very best as you establish your commission, and I look forward to hearing the next report when it comes back to us. That concludes this agenda item and council notes for the report. We move on then to agenda item 10, which is the report from Bristol's Women's Commission. And can I ask, please, Penny Gain of the Women's Commission to speak to the report. Penny, welcome.
Hello. Right. So our report focuses on the full range of our work. But this year, one issue has dominated, which demands everyone's attention. In terms of women's rights, equality and safety, we find ourselves in the middle of a perfect storm. The murders of Sarah Everard, Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman, and the police involvement in those cases have shocked us all. But as well as those appalling cases, there are many femicides which don't make the headlines. In a single year in Avon and Somerset, there were 5 domestic homicides and 6 suicides in the context of domestic abuse. In 2019 in Bristol, more than 11,000 instances of domestic violence were recorded where women were the victims, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. The real figure is 5 times that. Black, Asian and minority ethnic women, older women and disabled women are less likely to report abuse. Economic inequality facilitates violence. Poor households have 3.5 times higher rates of domestic violence and abuse. Women leaving abuse suffer greater poverty. Schoolgirls are at increased risk of sexual harassment and rape. 22 Bristol schools were named in the Everyone Invited initiative, which was followed by that very damning Ofsted report. I don't know if you watched the documentary last night, Rape, Who's on Trial, which followed 4 cases of rape being dealt with by Avon and Somerset Police. It exposed the challenges we face in inadequately addressing the widespread harm of misogyny in our society. There is an epidemic of violence against women and girls at the hands of men and boys. This needs to be at the top of everyone's agenda, every council department, all our partners and stakeholders, our businesses and our communities. The council's white ribbon status should not have been allowed to lapse. Our work is to identify, analyse, report, and help develop solutions to the many aspects of women's inequality. Our Economy Task Group has published a report on delivering an inclusive economy post-COVID-19 with crucial measures that can be adopted by city leaders and employers. It would be great to see some of these measures adopted. Affordable, flexible childcare has been a priority in the One City Plan and is now included in the corporate strategy, but we need much stronger action on this. Our Safety Task Group is focusing on homicide reviews, sexual harassment on public transport, and the continued licensing of sexual entertainment venues. Our business groups work to get better conditions of work for women, more women into positions of influence in companies, and more women to start their own companies. Our Education Task Force is mentoring women leaders, holding conferences with schools, and now focusing on harassment in schools, colleges, and universities. Our Women's Health Task Group is looking at the intersection between women's mental health and violence against women and girls. We've been invited to speak at Westminster Health Forum about our health strategy. Always good to get some national recognition of our work. And yet, even with the Domestic Violence Commission and the Police and Crime Plan with a strong emphasis on the elimination of violence against women and girls, there is still a mountain to climb. It's extraordinary that at a time when all our efforts need to be focused on stamping out the misogynistic culture that pervades so many aspects of our lives, the Licensing Committee continues to license sexual entertainment venues, undermining the good work of the Council and its partners in showing how men's sexual entitlement to women's bodies has become normalised. Teachers are trying to tackle the epidemic of harassment and rape in schools, to imbue school pupils with an understanding of consent and respect. And the City Council, although under-resourced in this area, actively supports this work. But at 18, these same young men can go to a strip club legitimised by the council. It makes no sense. I urge you to read the Safe and Equal Bristol report on this for an in-depth understanding of why we need a nil cap and to take part in the current consultation. And I will circulate the link to that report to all councillors. I look forward to hearing about progress on the implementation of the Domestic Violence Commission report next week, as well as helping to set up the Avon and Somerset Police Summit on violence against women and girls. Our commissioners and our task groups contribute huge amounts of time and energy to bring about positive change for women in the city. And I'd like to thank the Mayor and former Cabinet Member for Women, Councillor Helen Godwin, for their support, and look forward to working with Councillor Helen Holland, now in that role. We must all redouble our efforts in tackling this epidemic of male violence.
Thank you. And can I call Councillor Bales, please, to speak on behalf of the Labour Group? You should have a... Oh, there we go. Sorry, you should have a portable one in front of you. But there we go. Councillor Bales, you've got 3 minutes.
I'd like to thank Helen Godwin and Helen Holland for all the work they've done on their roles as Cabinet Member for Women and for contributing to the Women's Commission that have written this report. The work is essentially important currently. We, of course, know all about the case of Sarah Everard, Sabina Nessa, and the countless others who have been victims to male violence. The last year has shone a light on the male violence and will hopefully be a turning point in efforts to stamp it out. The work with sixth form colleges around Bristol is particularly timely. As the report mentions, there has been a disturbing increase in spiking that I know the Council is working with partners to address. And it is reassuring to see the Women's Commission is working with young women and girls to provide guidance to help prevent violence against young women. Although the report notes the White Ribbon City status has expired, I very much hope to see this status renewed soon. I also welcome the report from the Women and Economy Task Group, led by Alderwoman Diane Bunyan. The pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women. Women are more likely to be made redundant, and it made the gender pay gap even worse. There is, however, cause for optimism. Business West introduced 2 female executives to their board. Burgess Salmon reported 50% of those promoted to senior positions were female. Small Business Flipper Limited saw 2 women being appointed to senior roles in recent internal promotions, and GCP Chartered Architects now have 42% women in their senior management team. And while women are making up more senior roles in companies, I should also mention that they are a majority in the Labour group and close to making up half of all councillors and are a majority in the Cabinet. So, I haven't finished yet. So while there is, of course, still so much to be done, I want to end on a positive and thank all the women who are working to make the world a more equal place.
Thank you very much. And I'll call Councillor Stafford Townsend to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor, you have 3 minutes. There we go.
Hey, I'm here. Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. In a year where issues that affect women and girls and those assigned female or perceived as female have been brought to the forefront again and again due to terrible prominent murders, sexual abuses, the imbalance of the impacts of COVID, more recently drink spiking as well. It follows years of gendered violence and movements such as Me Too or Everyone Invited. It shines a light on what we, if we're all honest, we already know is there. Many of us here have first-hand experience of this. The report lists many ways in which women and girls and those perceived female are impacted in society. You know, the differences in mental and medical health care that's received by women, the intersect between domestic violence and self-harm, access to contraception, complications of childbirth, or the impacts of menopause. Also, the disproportionate burden of the COVID pandemic on women due to assumed responsibilities for caring and the high percentage of long COVID that affects women, as well as the jobs and the work that's paid that's carried out by women. And how gender intersects with race, class, disabilities and age, and endless references to the many forms of violence targeted at those that are female or perceived female. And quite rightly, this conversation must centre female voices, and it must be led by female voices, but it must be led by all female voices. But also the change that we need for women, girls, and those perceived female is not just our battle, it's the battle of all of us sat here, by educating our children and by educating ourselves, by making intersectional and inclusive politics central to all of our work as councillors and in our everyday lives. We can create the equality that's still desperately needed in our society. We thank the Women's Commission, and I look forward to their next steps and a future that is inclusive and intersectional. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Alexander to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
My Lord Mayor, I commend this update and all those involved in this work over the difficult last 12 months. Clearly, the planned activities of the various task groups hampered by the restrictions around control of the pandemic, but I think the overall impression to be drawn here is one of patchy progress. The report sets out the context within which this is presented, namely the shocking murder of Sarah Everard and heightened reporting of drink spiking and even direct drug jabbing into people, which can only undermine the economic recovery of our night economy. COVID has also contributed some disproportionate harmful outcomes for women, particularly around domestic violence and greater exposure to health risks because of their representation in social care and the NHS. The elimination of harassment and violence against women and girls must remain key priorities in this city. Lord Mayor, I cannot be alone in being shocked by the Ofsted findings of sexual incidents, including rape, in 22 Bristol schools. I am keen to know how this serious problem is being addressed. I know the Commission has expressed its continued opposition licensing of sexual entertainment venues, and I agree, but I am also concerned that it will be driven underground and more work has to be done to persuade the performers' employees in these establishments who choose to earn a living in such places that they can do other things that will keep them safe and that there is help out there for them. There are some positive developments recorded by the Women in Business Task Group and the signatures to the Women in Business Charter. I was also pleased to learn that one of the leading law firms, Burgess Salmon, has reported that 50% of their promotions to senior management positions were female. Furthermore, other companies like OVO Energy and Hargreaves Lansdowne are running successful mentoring schemes. I would just like to close by giving credit here to the Mayor for supporting this commission and enabling it to function more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
I'm sure I speak for a lot of women, and probably a lot of women here, when I say that over the last few months, the news has been sometimes incredibly sad and depressing. From the high-profile murders of Sarah Everard, Sabina Nessa, Nicole Smallman and Biba Henry, to name just a few that have got high-profile coverage, and the inevitable failures of certain institutions to tackle what led to those murders and the structural inequality that is still deeply rooted within them. From the government refusing to consider misogyny as a hate crime, to the Met Police's failure to properly respond to the actions of their own officers, plus story after story of attacks on women's health and reproductive rights across the globe. There's also the appalling statistics about the number of rapes and sexual assaults that actually lead to conviction. Essentially, in this country, those crimes are decriminalised based on how much actually reach a successful conviction, and the fact that domestic violence rates continue to rise. This is some of the reasons why it's so important that we have a Women's Commission in Bristol that fights for the rights of all women across Bristol in a number of different areas. The pandemic over the last nearly 2 years has put existing inequalities under a microscope, and we can't go back to the way things were before. We need to see greater understanding of the challenges women face in the workplace, around flexibility, in their health, and within their role in the domestic labour of the home, and also the way that domestic violence rates have risen as a result of the pandemic. The Council's own report into gender pay data within the organisation still showed a significant gap between the earnings of men and women, with many women still only able to access low-paid jobs within the city. As a council, we need to do more to bring more women into senior roles and have that access, that pathway access for women into those positions. As others have touched on, a video that went around social media which showed a Bristol nightclub alleged incident of drink spiking. The response to this was an outpouring of women coming forward with their own stories of spiking in nightclubs. And I welcome the fact that the council is engaging with nighttime economy partners on the anti-spiking and also the Bristol rules, the nighttime economy. And these are positive steps taken in the city. And I hope that the council continues that engagement. Women engaging with the nighttime economy in Bristol, whether as customers or workers, deserve a safe environment free from harassment and danger. And finally, even within this chamber, women are still underrepresented as councillors. Approximately 51% of Bristol residents are women, and yet still, from my napkin maths, I think there's about 41% of councillors in this chamber that are women. More needs to be done to make politics accessible for women, from ensuring that councillor work is able to be completed around commitments to family life, supporting against some of the online abuse that many women in politics face. And I look forward to working with the Bristol Women's Commission on this issue, and hopefully seeing more women represented in the chamber and representing Bristol.
Thank you very much. And to conclude the debate, I'll invite the Cabinet Member Helen Holland to respond. Councillor Holland, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And this is the first time I've spoken to the Chamber with that new part of my portfolio, but it's one that I'm really proud to have and to add to the other work that I do. And as other members have said, and I think the contributions have been great on this report, so thank you to all of those colleagues. There's huge thanks to the Women's Commission, the women's networks that the Women's Commission plugs into, and all of those individual women who do that work. It's a massive amount of work, and it's a huge contribution to the city and the wide networks that the expertise from the Commission draws on. As people have said, the particular highlight that we've had over the last few months on violence against women has really thrown this topic into sharp relief. And I think that Penny and I had this conversation a few days ago, that the Women's Commission has been around the longest of the Council's commissions, And it's easy for people to think, we've heard all this before, we've heard about domestic violence, we've heard about women not feeling safe on the streets, but when are we going to do something about it? And I agree that it's shocking that the council lost its white ribbon or didn't regain its white ribbon status, and that's something that I'm definitely going to do something about. So it's easy for people to think that those issues have been addressed and we've been hearing about them for so many years that we don't need to do anything, but the time is absolutely right to redouble our efforts to do that. And I'm sure you all appreciate that a new Chief Constable has been appointed, and that's Sarah Crew, a woman Chief Constable. She leads for the Chief Constables on issues about drink spiking and violence against women. And I think in an email conversation I had with the Chief Constable, she agrees that this is a watershed moment and we cannot let things continue as they are, because those recent events have highlighted that in many ways we've gone backwards. The issue about domestic violence, the hidden problem of domestic violence and young people not being able to be at school and talk about what's going on in their home during the pandemic has also exacerbated that problem. And I think, again, it's a conversation we had earlier, Kerry, isn't it, about some of those relationship issues being normalised amongst young people, and we need to work with schools to do that, and I know that the Commission is doing a lot of work on that. So I don't want to pick on any of the particular themes in the report, because obviously I've only been doing this work for a month, and I don't want to take any credit for what went before when Helen Godwin had that role. But I do think that there's one other thing that I wanted to draw everybody's attention to.
Councillor Hong, I'm sorry, you've come to the end of your 3 minutes, so could you just wind up?
So yes, I want to thank the Commission very much and to say that's how much I'm looking forward to working with them over the next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That concludes the debate, and the report is noted by Council. Thank you. So we now move to agenda item 11, the report from the Commission on Race Equality. And I ask Mr. Ahmed Takolia, the Chair of the Commission on Race Equality, to speak to us for about 5 minutes on the content of the report.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Lord Mayor, members of the Council. 33 years ago, I stood in this chamber. I've got 5 minutes now to make up for lost time. And the thing I'm missing most is the smiles on people's faces. So I hope you'll warmly welcome me behind those masks. I'd like to begin by thanking the Council for inviting me, the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, and all members. Professor Olivette Otel chaired the Commission last year. She isn't able to be here, and for a short period, my Vice Chair, Margaret Simmons-Bird, who's sitting behind me, also took stewardship of the Commission. I'd like to thank them for their responsibility in taking the Commission forward in very testing times, as we've all experienced. I'd like also to acknowledge the work of the Commissioners for their commitment, their tenacity, their resilience, all of which they undertook as unpaid volunteers in the service of this great city. I'd like to thank the officials of the City Council who support the Commission and at Black South West Network. Now, I'll move to the substantive points that I can comment on. The report has been circulated. I wanted to draw your attention to a few salient points. If there was a way for me to talk about racial equality, racism and discrimination that didn't make you feel uncomfortable, I would do it, but there isn't. The data that sits behind the narrative in this report that you've received is compelling. Disparities are yawning. Inequalities still persist in major areas of life in Bristol's community of Black, Asian, and other minority ethnic groups. Notable areas of concern are education, jobs and skills in the economy, health and well-being, criminal justice, and housing and regeneration. And we all appreciate and know that that's going to be a harder drive and recovery post-pandemic. I took up my appointment on the 5th of October, and it's very clear the mission, the task that I have. Unless councillors in this chamber demand something different, you will repeat the same mistakes of your predecessors who cared as much as you do, I don't doubt, but saw slow progress being made. Bristol is a city with lots of positive energy, talent, capacity. The vision for one city is really inspiring and calls for a united response politically, but also institutionally. And to your credit, your leadership as a council in establishing the Equality Commissions under the Mayor has given this area of work priority and momentum towards achieving racial equity and justice. But just as the limits of that are apparent to me, they should be apparent to you. The evidence I've seen so far confirms to me that this is not about what we in this chamber talk about and do, but what others outside the chamber actually achieve. And that's why I hope, very early days, but alongside the chairs of the other Equality Commissions, I'm calling on the partners in the coalition of public and private sector bodies that make up one city to step up, to stand with you, to ask them to put their money where their convictions are, and to match fund at least the Mayor's Equality Commissions, so that give us the resources and the teeth with which to address some of the challenges you've heard from Alan and Penny. And this work, we all appreciate, is of value to all who live in the city, all who work in the city, and all who operate businesses in the city. As it stands today, the report confirms that this work will not be done in the term that remains for the current administration. In order for us to maintain momentum, in order to build a sustainable infrastructure, we need to work, all of us, in a different way. And that begins by recognizing that there are large institutions out there with major power, people, and resources that we need to leverage. So with a few priorities in mind, and perhaps fewer priorities in mind for the Commission that I'm going to chair, the focus will be on economy, jobs, skills and education, housing and regeneration, I'm collapsing them thematically, and leadership and talent development. That's to say, putting people in places that show that diversity and inclusion is literally changing the face of Bristol. I come to my concluding comments, Lord Mayor. The Commission has an away day coming up. We're meeting later this month with a work plan coming forward for 2022. The Commission is likely to shift to a more strategic role with its commissioners, and as a consequence for the Commission as a whole. We will work with local, regional, and where appropriate national partners to use data and evidence and to bring resources to support the delivery of measurable outcomes in performance against a fewer set of key priorities, and will increase the visibility and presence of the Commission and its commissioners through engagement events and develop a communications plan that focuses on communities. And finally, an absolute final comment for future reporting to the Council. I've made a few suggestions to officers that I feel might allow something more like a select committee type interrogation of detail that I hope and I feel would give more justice to the work of the Commission and the time that the Commission has put in on your behalf. I hope we get that opportunity in the future. With those remarks, I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call Councillor King to speak on behalf of the Labour Group. Councillor King, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. COVID made visible deep inequalities in our society, and this is no more evident than when it comes to racial inequalities. COVID, combined with the tragic death of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, brought the issue to the fore and demanded immediate action. Of course, in Bristol, this issue has been recognised for a while, and then acted on in 2018 when our Mayor initiated the Commission on Race Equality, or CORE as it is referred to. CORE was born out of a commitment to work to ensure that all racial minorities in Bristol get to reap the rewards of living in a vibrant and progressive city. The current iteration of CORE tackles racial disparities through work streams that include education, criminal justice, health and well-being, community engagement and economy. If I just take one of those work streams for a moment, health and well-being, which is even more important than usual during the pandemic, CORE's task group has chosen to focus their resources on refugee and asylum seekers from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. They do this through enabling and empowering them to access the full range of health and wellbeing services within the city, by being an influential voice and steer for these communities in clinical commissioning, and by linking up with VCSE organisations, Black Southwest Network and other Bristol Black, Asian and minority ethnic enterprises to champion community-centred decision-making as industry best practice. This work truly does make us a city of sanctuary. I've only been in the cabinet a month, but in that time, I would be hard-pushed to think of a single conversation I've had with fellow cabinet members or officers where equalities and inclusion hasn't been the lens through which we view everything. That said, there continues to be a lot of work to do in this space. The impact of race and indeed all inequalities in the city provides us with the mandate to call for action, which is why I welcome this latest report and its clear and determined work plan for the coming year. I urge colleagues, fellow councillors and members of the public to read it. I'll end with a quote from Meghan Markle, which speaks to the very soul of what CORE are trying to achieve. It is not enough just to survive. You've got to thrive. Thank you.
Apologies, thank you. I call Councillor Francis, please, to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Yeah, you have to give it a good shove. There you go. You have 3 minutes, Councillor Francis.
Okay. Do I have to stand? Okay. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Beg your pardon. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm quite tall. This is the first time, so I'm going to sit because then you can hear me clearly. This is the first time I've spoken in council, so forgive me if I do make any errors as I proceed. I'm going to read the report, and I'm glad to say that the chair of the commission has actually responded to some of my points without realising. Here is my brief response. I received the report in anticipation as I was keen to see how the council has approached the issues relating to inequalities and how the Commission will address some of the challenges faced by Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities across the city, as this is an issue very close to my heart. The report does set out its aims and objectives, and there is a sense that this type of commission could work towards developing a principled way. Hold on a second. A principled way of assessing the disparities which continue to exist, which I welcome. Focusing on health and well-being task group, I do respectfully question the validity of the statement that the Commission intend to empower the community to access and take full advantage of the city mental health and well-being services, provision and resources. There is sadly a huge financial deficit within the health and social care budget, so I am unclear what that actually means. There is a wide gap between statutory mental health services, for example, and well-being activities which exist, and how and when communities may need to access a Mental Health Act assessment 1983 versus accessing well-being advice or provisions to tackle high blood pressure or other physical health conditions. So those two things are very different. People's Directorate, for example, also reports almost 17,000 working days, 31.6% of all employees' time off is in relation to illnesses associated to well-being. So there is a real concern with that. That was between September last year and August 31st this year. In addition, women and BME staff are disproportionately reflected in the overall data, which I obviously can't go into. When considering communities, how important is it to recognise the illegal levels of air pollution in some parts of Bristol? It's a geographical inequality which disproportionately affects BAME people. resolving drain maintenance, fly tipping, waste clogging up certain parts of the city, does appear to have a geological element. Therefore, I would like to have seen some evidence across the report which demonstrated how the Commission engaged with frontline staff or individuals within the community who are affected across the key areas. I am speeding up. The ongoing knife crimes, which killed Dante Davis recently, blighting our communities, the death of Sabina Nessa, who does tend to go ignored, to continue to destroy families across the city. Speeding up. However, I'd like to say, I still have more to read, but I'm going to end here. I really, really welcome the report, I welcome the Commission, and I look forward to continuing to support your activities as you move forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I now call Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Councillor Weston, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Congratulations on your maiden speech, by the way. Mine is in the long, distant past at this stage. Firstly, I thank you for the report. I've read it in detail, and I look forward to, I think, our meeting on the 8th of December, so we can go through it. I'm looking forward to that. And I've got to say, it's refreshing to reach out. I have quite a few questions on the report, but in a constructive way. There's obviously a lot of good work done, and as has been mentioned, COVID has exacerbated a lot of the differences and inequalities in our society, and they cut down through all different stratas of how we are built as communities. But actually race has obviously played a key role in that, and the differences that come from it. And when you're reading the report and you're looking at the objectives, and particularly what jumped out to me was health and well-being. You know, when we're talking about health and well-being, at the beginning, the low uptake in COVID vaccines thankfully reversed through a lot of hard work, including from the Commission itself. But there's other things that struck me as well. In some cultures in the BME community, there's no word for autism. So are we sure that they're accessing the help that they need to access and they deserve to access? And I look forward to asking you this in December when we meet. There's other things, like when we're talking about SEND provision, a lot of people I speak to from Southeast Asian background teach ABA as part of SEND. Actually, the Council doesn't support ABA. So are we actually supporting a segment of our society that have embraced a different kind of education when it comes to SEND? Things I'd like to know. When we're talking about business equality, well, when I was talking to the Somali Forum, they have an awful lot of very hard-working micro-business people. But what they're finding hard is how they move from the micro-business to the small business and build up. There seems to be a barrier there. Now, we know that there is education, there's training, but are they being signposted to the right place that lets us harness that enterprise and really kickstart the economy of the city? Because if not, we are ignoring an area of our society that really could create jobs in a phenomenal way. But they seem to be left behind, and it's a complaint that comes to me year after year. The work you've done is impressive. Genuinely it is. And I look forward to our meeting on the 8th of December, because we want to reach out, we want to try and feed in the ideas that we see, and see if we can focus assistance, focus efforts, focus energy into areas that really will tap into some of our communities that for too long are being ignored. And I think we can all be stronger and strengthened as a city if we manage to bring all that energy together. So thank you for your report, and I look forward to seeing you in December.
Thank you, and I call Councillor Hartley to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to echo my fellow councillors' thanks to the Chair, all of the Commissioners and everyone else involved on the Commission for all of your continued work over the last year, especially given the difficulties of the pandemic. Across their multiple work streams, from health and wellbeing to criminal justice, the Commission is continuing its work in challenging the current situation of racial inequality and improving equality levels for all of our BME citizens. Of particular note is the Commission's strong emphasis on community engagement, with their newest committee, the Community Engagement Committee, which should always be applauded. Every community benefits from greater engagement from the Council, and an end to top-down projects instead being replaced with on-the-ground support and greater outreach. I also commend the Commission for its new strategy of increased engagement sessions, which will allow it to reach BME people who may not actively reach out to the Council. One line from the report that really stood out to me was, "Nothing about us without us." I hope this same ethos can be carried by the Council through all its activities. While we have seen an improvement in racial equality over recent decades, we still have a very long way to go. In the 2021 Quality of Life Survey, I was horrified to read that over 55% of our Black British community in Bristol have experienced racial harassment in the last year, 8 times the city average. Bristol is still facing terrible levels of racial injustice, depriving our residents of the great quality of life that everyone deserves. This is a scandal, but my hope is that the Race Equality Commission, through its valiant work, can work to make Bristol a more equal place for all races. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the new chair and the 3 new commission members, and I'd also like to add a big thank you to all the commissioners who volunteer so much of their time, but manage to produce so much. I wish them all the best with their away day later this month and everything ahead in 2022. Thank you very much for all your work. It is so vitally important to everyone in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. And to conclude the debate, I'll invite Deputy Mayor Councillor Asher Craig to respond. Councillor Craig, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter have highlighted the fact that the journey towards racial justice has a long way to go before it is felt reality in the lived experiences of Black and minoritized people here in the UK. In every facet of life, from birth, evidence of continued racial discrimination persists through education, health inequalities, the unequal distribution of wealth, access to work, recruitment, promotion, representation at the most senior levels, and the ability to influence decision-making and access opportunities. Systemic racism is deeply embedded within institutions, yet despite this compelling evidence, the current social and political context is one in which those who wish to prevent progress towards racial justice continually seek to delegitimize accounts of racism, while simultaneously leveraging the perceived victimization of those who are white. This noxious culture war threatens to silence the voices of those who are working towards building a better and more equitable future for all, and bring to a halt the ready snail-like progress that is being made, meaning that for generations to come, racial discrimination will continue to function as an accepted norm. It's clear that current systems and organizational norms were not designed for people like me to thrive. Outcome measures consistently attest to these facts year on year. The harm caused to our staff, service users, and communities through systemic racism cannot be easily quantified. However, accounts from Black and minoritized people attest of the harms that continue to proliferate without many signs of abating. Waiting for current decision makers to get it and to take urgent action to overhaul systems in which their interests are advantaged is a strategy that has failed to deliver justice for people who look like me. It is now time for us to push forward in different ways so that both the methods used and the destination we seek to arrive at delivers racial justice for all. I'm absolutely delighted that Maseji stepped up to become the chair of the Commission on Race Equality and take forward the city's aspirations in further race equality and inclusion here in the city. Maseji brings a breadth of leadership experience that is unparalleled, and the fact that he has come full circle, I was with you those 33 years ago, even though I was on the other side, speaks volumes, because it was Maseji and his team who actually put Bristol on the map when it came to the work that we did on race equality. And I remember the standards that we reached as a local authority and other local authorities looking at Bristol as good practice. So I am both delighted that Maseji is leading the commission. I want to thank the commissioners who are working extremely hard to challenge the structural inequalities experienced by our residents here in the city. I think I should make it clear.
Councillor Craig, your time has come to an end, please.
Okay, I think I should just make it clear. This commission is a strategic body. It's not here to deliver on the ground. That's our work and those of the organisations out in the community. And finally, progress for racial justice cannot happen in the absence of strategic clarity, commitment, persistence, and the right sources of funding with a commitment to achieving those goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate, and Council notes the report. We move on to agenda item 12, the annual report, the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2020-21. Councillor Cheney, can you introduce the report, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The Treasury Management Annual Report is a regulatory requirement that full council must consider each year. In summary, the Treasury activities and Treasury indicators were in accordance with the authority's strategy and government regulations. The key points of the report being that the Council has a medium-term borrowing requirement of 215 million. The policy of deferring borrowing while it has significant Treasury balances was followed during the year. This course of action will minimise the net financing costs of the authority while also reducing the Council's exposure to investment default. Long-term debt at the 31st of March was 451 million with an average interest rate of 4.48%. Investments were 207 million with an average annual interest rate of 0.30%. Noting base rate for the year remained at 0.10. The pandemic has caused significant global economic downturn affecting the financial markets during the year, reducing and keeping interest rates at historic low levels. It's a technical report really, and it's just for noting, so I'm pleased to recommend it to you today.
Thank you very much. So the report is for noting, so I'll now turn to the remaining groups to speak and call Councillor Grant to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this is my first time also speaking in full council, and which more obvious topic to begin with than the highly popular and easily accessible Treasury Management Report. I am, along with Councillor Heather Mack, the Green Shadow Member for Finance, which is why I'm speaking to this today. These are difficult times, and difficult times always means extra pressure on the management of resources, cash flow and economic risks. We were affected by the nationwide impacts of Brexit, the pandemic, associated shocks to the economy, and more recent inflationary pressures, but also by more local issues such as the high cost and growing demand for social adult care in Bristol. We have a lot of recovering to do, as well as a lot of getting ready for what lies ahead in terms of the climate emergency. So even if not a breathless rollercoaster of a read, this report is important. Thank you for the hard work on putting it together and putting in there a lot of information about important decisions concerning the Council's borrowing, investment and exposure. It is good to see that the current cash reserves are such that further borrowing is being deferred. However, we must remember how the public will see this very large sum of £207 million in the context of a £23 million shortfall in the upcoming budget, which could, of course, result in cuts to services. If for reasons of risk avoidance and contingency we cannot deploy these cash reserves to help plug vital service provision gaps, then this report should explain more clearly why not. We councillors should be able to speak with openness and transparency about this. It is also suggested that some of this reserve could be used for local authority lending. It would be good to know to what extent this is happening, to which authorities and at what interest rate. This may be under review for the ethical investment strategy, but that's not available to us yet, whereas these are legitimate questions in the context of this Treasury Management Report. These questions are of particular importance now as the budget is prepared. We understand clearly the need for prudence, but too much prudence will have consequences for the daily experience of the residents of this city. We Greens are going to be asking for maximum ingenuity in avoiding cuts to services. We cannot overlook the very urgent and currently growing need for support amongst the most vulnerable in Bristol. On the question of the budget development, the Green Group has been in touch with Councillor Cheney, and we are really keen to approach this important task in a collaborative manner throughout the process from the beginning. The size of the Green Group suggests a new and more joined-up approach, we feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Perfect timing as well. And can I call Councillor Hooker, please, to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have pleasure in commenting on this report on behalf of the Conservative Group, although I have to say that for most people, Treasury is probably not the most exciting of subjects. I can't imagine that books on Treasury management are exactly flying off the shelves. However, Treasury management is critically important for any organisation. If the Treasury fails, then the organisation itself fails. As a new councillor, I attended Treasury briefing sessions by officers and advisors, and I'm pleased to say that I was reassured by what I heard and the responses to the questions that I asked. Treasury management is both strategic and operational. The report mainly focuses on strategic matters, but both are very important, because getting large sums of money to the right place at the right time can certainly keep you awake at night. Treasurers operate within an environment when events can change very quickly and significant unforeseen events happen, such as the financial crisis and the global pandemic. So resilience and flexibility to absorb such shocks is key. One thing that the report does not mention, which I thought was worthy of mention, is the value of coronavirus support grants provided to businesses during the course of the year. That was £145 million, which the Treasury Department were responsible for. I think that these were critical for the survival of many businesses, and I've no doubt that this was a very challenging logistical operation to deliver that. Effective risk management is vital. I do have confidence in the methodology that the Council employs to select its investment counterparties. Although in the past, Icelandic banks, and I rejected their advice. They would ring me up and say, "These boys, they pay great rates, and by not investing with them, you're just throwing money away." But public bodies lent £1 billion. Bristol City Council were included in that, but fortunately, I gather that most of it has been recovered through the administration processes. Over £500 million, approaching £500 million, Bristol City Council's gross debt is not insignificant.
Councillor Hooker, you're over time. Can you wind up, please?
Okay, so that debt needs to be managed efficiently to ensure the financial well-being of the council. The council has a significant amount of cash on deposit at £207 million. One of the main reasons is the slippage of the capital programme. I welcome new plans to keep capital spending on track. And finally, I'd just like to thank the Council Treasury team for their commitment and hard work during an incredibly challenging time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I call Councillor Brown, please, to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group? Yeah, 3 minutes, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. When I read in the papers that there was a requirement for a mid-year and a year-end report on the Treasury management strategy to be made to Council, I assumed that this was the mid-year report, given that it's now November. I guess I'm still getting used to the rhythm of the Council business. It did dawn on me, as I was reading the report, that some of the economic information and analysis seemed out of date. For example, on inflation, the latest expectations are that it's likely to peak at 4 to 5% by the end of the year, rather than just over 2%. Depending on the drivers of inflation, and we know that there's quite a number of factors, interest rate increases cannot be ruled out. And the Council should continue to be alert for opportunities to refinance its most expensive loans, especially if it starts to look like interest rates will increase. I endorse the policy, though, of utilising reserves for internal borrowing, particularly whilst the yield on these remains low. And again, that should be kept under review, although I don't anticipate interest rates for savers will increase anytime soon. The report also presents an optimistic picture of the positive economic recovery with limited impact from Brexit. It remains to be seen how things will play out with regard to COVID, which continues to impact on council income and demand for our services. Likewise, things remain uncertain as the Brexit transition period expires. As the Brexit transition periods expire, supply chain issues continue, and negotiations on the application of the Northern Ireland Protocol get underway in earnest again. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. Turning to the figures in the report, I welcome the reduction in both total borrowing and the average interest rate charged, although I note that this is largely offset with an increase in finance on PFI and service contracts. I also note that the report details an additional 49 million in long-term service investments, with 37 million loaned to companies within Bristol Holdings. Following the experience of Bristol Energy, the Council to be as open as possible about these and allow appropriate and timely scrutiny. Finally, I'm pleased to note that the ethical policy has been breached, and I look forward to working within the Ethical and Equitable Investment Policy Working Group, which is seeking to update and expand the policy as it relates to Treasury and investment management. And I look forward to this coming to the...
Thank you very much. Councillor Cheney, would you like to respond to the debate?
Only to thank everyone for their comments. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. In which case, the recommendation is to note the report. So the report is noted. We move then to agenda item 13, a constitutional update, appointing members to committees and changing chairing arrangements. The recommendations are to approve the appointment of Councillor Pearce to the Licensing Committee and to appoint Councillor Dyer as Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. I will move those recommendations. Can I ask Deputy Lord Mayor Councillor Varney to second them, please?
I second those recommendations, reserving my remarks.
Thank you very much. There will be no debate on this item, so we move straight to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against, say nay. Good. Then those recommendations are carried. Thank you very much. We will now take an adjournment of 20 minutes. Refreshments will be in the group rooms as before. Please be back in your seats, ready to start the next part of the meeting at 8:35. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're going to make a start, please. Now, at this point in the meeting, we suspect that both the motions item is likely to run past its allotted 30 minutes, and indeed that the meeting as a whole is going to run past its allotted 2.5 hours allowed in the Constitution. So at this point, I'm going to move a motion to extend the time for the meeting until such time as we complete the golden motion, which we anticipate requiring about an hour and a quarter, depending, of course, how long everyone speaks for. Can I take that motion as agreed? Aye, lovely. Thank you very much. And I would remind members, we've had several speeches this evening that have run well over the 3-minute limit. We've got another 20-odd speeches to go yet. If everyone takes another minute, that's us here 20 minutes later in the evening, for which I think nobody will thank you. So if I could gently remind people, please, the 3-minute limit is there for a reason, and it's a courtesy to your fellow members. So we move to agenda item 14, the golden motion, a workplace parking levy for Bristol. The motion is shown on the screen. And this has been published in the supplement this afternoon on the website and in the ModGov app. So I'll now ask Councillor Wilcox of the Green Group to move the motion. Councillor Wilcox, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The workplace parking levy, or as I prefer to call it, a corporate parking levy, will bring many benefits to Bristol, such as reduced commuting congestion and pollution. In addition, it will provide protected revenue for Bristol Council to invest in public transport and active travel. I would like to expand on why Bristol needs one, the practical implementation and economics of the parking levy in Bristol. We need a corporate parking levy to manage demand for car storage and movement in Bristol. The majority of commuters in Bristol live outside the city boundary and travel into the city. They do not contribute to the city finances for mitigating the effects of road use and pollution. We must reduce the number of commuting journeys and provide alternatives to car use, freeing up road space to dedicate to public transport and active travel. We are 8 years away from a climate deadline of being carbon neutral by 2030. We need to use every tool in the toolbox to meet this target. These tools include workplace parking levy, clean air zones, residence parking zones, and a transition to low and zero emission vehicles. Missing that target has massive consequences for future generations. I do not want my grandniece to ask me why we missed this opportunity. Using the best practice of the Nottingham scheme, the levy would charge employers for having company car parking spaces. However, employees with less than 11 spaces would be exempt, as would those dedicated to electric vehicle charging and ones used by blue badge holders. Visitor, delivery and NHS frontline staff vehicle parking would also be exempt. In addition, Bristol, as a result of its study and consultation, could offer more nuanced exceptions. Grants could be made available to employers to install charging bays, improve facilities for cyclists or subsidise bus travel. When the Atkins report into the workplace parking levy was produced in 2011, there was an estimated 57,000 corporate parking spaces in the city boundary. We await the amendment in 2021 by Councillor Jerome Thomas. However, we understand that the report will support a workplace parking levy. Using the existing figure of a Nottingham yearly charge of £428, which is a daily charge of £1.44, around the price of a litre of petrol. A Bristol Live report from 2020 estimated that the average commuter lost out to the tune of £900 by waiting in queues, fuel and maintenance of their car. Assuming that the number of exempt spaces is 50% of the available, this would bring in over £12 million each year, which should be dedicated to improving public transport and active travel.
Councillor Wilcox, you're over your time now. Can you come to an end, please?
This is a game-changing amount of money. Nottingham unlocked £600 million of funding for their tram network and electric buses. The Nottingham scheme is managed by a team of half a dozen people, so the running costs are minimal in comparison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Y of the Green Group to second the motion. Yeah, 3 minutes, Councillor
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 1/5 of the UK's damaging greenhouse gas emissions come from road transport, and that's a problem that I'm determined we must address in Bristol. Words I entirely agree with from my colleague, Councillor Alexander, in the recent Mayor's blog. As with all cities, Bristol needs a multifaceted response, particularly as we are routinely one of the worst cities for traffic congestions. Much as I support them, do we really believe that the CAS and 1 or 2 low traffic neighbourhoods are going to be enough, certainly within the timescales we need to act? As a councillor, I am regularly asked what the council is doing to improve traffic management and air quality. I'm sure it's similar with other colleagues. It's a major concern and was a consistent message during the election campaign. My neighbours have a newborn baby and they are leaving Ashley simply because of the air quality. I think that is a tragic indictment of our inability to tackle this issue. Much in favour of CAS though I am, it is criticised for being unfair, penalising the less well-off who can't afford new cars, and will affect areas like St Paul's in my own ward as people drive around it. This proposal will charge businesses, not individuals. Free corporate parking is, in many cases, a perk reserved for senior managers. This proposal makes it clear that everyone needs to make a contribution to our city's air quality, local residents, commuters and businesses. Indeed, the experience of other cities suggests that businesses can be supportive, with not one business having moved out of Nottingham. There is an urgency here, and this is one of the reasons we are bringing this motion now, ahead of the report, which we understand, as David said, will be positive and add to the growing evidence around WPLs. We have been waiting a long time for this, watching while the Labour administration in Nottingham has grasped it and ran with it. It's been 10 years in the planning of Bristol. It's been 2 since we commissioned this report. My real fear is that this report will be received very quietly at some point. It will be applauded and noted and then put on the back burner as too difficult or too challenging for business. There is a real danger that the whole issue will be kicked beyond the next election. This motion is not jumping the gun. It calls for us to note the appraisal reports being produced, and pending findings, it sets out a sensible 2.5-year implementation programme to fully consult and address all the issues people will raise, such as exemption for key workers. And we know this policy can raise millions of pounds every year to improve Bristol's transport. We could even, Don, maybe fund some more LTNs out of it, which would be fantastic. We have had the IPC report, and in the middle of COP26, we have been told by the science that we must act now. It is not a choice. To quote the Queen's message to COP, the time for words has now moved to the time for action. I urge you to support this motion and oppose the amendment we are about to hear, which I sadly fear will have the effect of just kicking this down into the long grass, and we will miss a fantastic opportunity for the City of Bristol to do something really positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have an amendment now from the Labour Group. This has been published online as a supplement to this meeting earlier this afternoon, and I call Councillor Alexander to move the amendment on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We're tabling this amendment because it would be wrong for us to commit to a tax rise in a public forum without consulting the public and without knowing the costs or the benefits. This isn't to say it's a workplace parking levy, or shall we say corporate parking levy, as it has been renamed over there. It's a workplace parking levy as defined in the Transport Act 2000, and it's not necessarily just for people coming in from outside the city. So to portray it as that is incorrect. But that is not to say that a workplace parking levy may not become a necessity, because the autumn budget, for instance, gave precious little for councils. But we don't know how much money it would raise. We don't know who would be exempt. We don't know the area it would cover, and we don't know the administration costs. If it covered a small area with a myriad of exemptions, as has been suggested, it could well have such high administration costs and such low revenue that it might not be worth pursuing. The last study in Bristol was in 2011, as has been said. Since then, we've done a lot of work to encourage active travel and public transport, such as pedestrianising the old city and other areas of the city, which I could name. We've closed Bristol Bridge, Baldwin Street to traffic, and we're about to consult on closing Park Street. We've just announced last week a clean air zone incoming next year, which will reduce the number of cars coming into the centre of the city. Let's do proper studies, consult people, and then consider it. We have nothing to gain, but a lot to lose from jumping the gun. Why do we need to consult people? Nottingham's workplace parking levy charges teachers. With school budgets stretched, then they will undoubtedly pass that on to their employees. Nottingham's charging £428 per space per year. That's £428 out of teachers' pay packets at a time when there's already inflation, skyrocketing energy bills, and universal credit cuts, and continuing Tory austerity. And that's without mentioning care workers and others. We're not clear whether or not those people would have to pay the workplace parking levy, or whether it be passed on to them by their employers. We need to know that before we jump up and down and say, yes, this is a great idea. That's called responsible leadership. It was only a few months ago when we were clapping for key workers, teachers included, and what sort of consultation is, and now they may find out that their tax bill goes up £428 a year. I'm sure that someone will say we could consult after we agree on it. But I'm very keen, and this is something that...
Councillor Alexander, you're over your time now. Can you wind up, please?
All the stuff I do in transport is that consultations are very genuine and very straightforward requests for information that we need from people. So we will not be supporting this. We will stand up for responsible leadership, which means talking to people, learning, and being prepared to mitigate the impacts on some of the most disadvantaged people in the city, something you're not prepared to do.
Thank you very much. We've so far had 3 speeches, all 3 of which have gone over the 3-minute time limit. I'll just remind members again that if people keep doing that, we will hear for later this evening than it's already going to be. So please consider your colleagues are making good speeches. Councillor Bennett, I invite you to second the amendment on behalf of the Levy Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'll be as brief as possible. Look, I agree that we need action to tackle air pollution and congestion in Bristol, and this includes tackling car dependency. It's just not justifiable to commit to a charging workplace parking levy in only 2 years' time without knowing more about the potential benefits and drawbacks. It's also wrong to do this whilst another tax that will tackle air pollution and congestion, a clean air zone, is being introduced next year. This motion goes about things completely the wrong way, saying we want to tax you, but not saying what it'll pay for. I want to get people cycling, walking and on the bus, and unlock the sustainable transport funding to enable them to do so. My bike is the only form of transport that I own, and I completely share the desire to get more people travelling sustainably. But this approach just isn't how you sell new taxes to people. It's worth noting that in Nottingham, they had a mass transit system and publicly owned buses even before the levy. The levy was then sold to people by saying, this will expand our mass transit by funding 2 new tram lines and an upgraded railway station, which it then did. It's a shame that this motion fails to make any concrete promises as to what the money raised will actually deliver. If a WPL is the solution, then so is a mass transit system, so I hope to see support from the opposition for that. It would also be welcome to see Tory councillors lobby their government to change the rules to allow councils to run their own bus services rather than be at the mercy of private operators. Our amendment is seeking more information before committing to a tax that will mostly be passed on to employees. You might prefer to call it a corporate parking levy, but in Nottingham, 8 out of 10 companies have passed on the costs, a fee of over £400 a year, to their staff. Doing the same here would mean teachers or low-paid staff working anywhere in the city, not just in the city centre, but in areas which can be very difficult to reach via public transport, would be charged. If they're unlucky and had to travel through the clean air zone, they might be doubly affected. As Don said, this study quoted in the motion is from 2011. Things have changed hugely since then, especially considering the impact of the COVID pandemic on work and travel habits, and the fact many businesses will now be struggling. It's also worth noting that the study on a workplace parking levy that we're currently undertaking was funded in our last budget, a budget that Labour voted for, but the Greens voted against. So I hope everyone votes for this amendment, because if you support or oppose a WPL, it's the principle that taxing working people should only be imposed after careful consideration and consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from speakers on the amendment, and I call Councillor Hathaway of the Green Group. Councillor Hathaway, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I honestly don't know where to start with this amendment, which is clearly designed to undermine the motion by removing any sense of urgency and passing the ball firmly back to the administration to decide whether to even progress it at all. It dresses this up by sprinkling in calls for work to happen that would have to happen anyway. For example, a new scoping study and measuring impacts on businesses that the council is entitled to do in developing exemptions, as already described. Every Bristolian will know that our city is plagued by congestion and poor public transport options, and that successive administrations have failed to deal with the issue. They recognise that there are simply too many of us to each drive in and out of the city freely on a whim in our own personal vehicles, and understand that the solution is fewer cars, reliable buses, and safe walking and cycling routes. In this very week of COP, where colleagues have stood and rightly celebrated the actions we are taking to decarbonise and talked of the need for cities to raise their own funds, we should tonight be welcoming the call for a corporate parking levy on businesses. You do not need to be a behavioural psychologist to know that getting people to change habits requires a carrot and stick approach. For far too long, we've given a bit of stick and precious little carrot. A corporate or workplace parking levy that protects our NHS, small businesses, self-employed tradespeople, and those that already pay for the commute to work, whilst raising ring-fenced funds for improving access to public transport and making our streets safer, is a win-win solution for the city and those that still need to drive. I'd urge colleagues, particularly those that call themselves socialists, to reject adopting the neoliberal trope that a tax on business is a tax on the individual. We know in Nottingham, where the levy has long been a success, that over half of chargeable spaces are passed on at no or subsidised cost to the users. For those in businesses, and let's be clear, that is on the businesses, choose to pass on the full cost, the burden is less than £2 per working day. Cheaper still than a bus ticket. In this chamber some 5 years ago, this council voted for a clean air zone, and we've been dragging our heels whilst the city suffers and our crucial net zero deadline draws ever closer. Let's not make the same mistake again and reject this amendment.
Thank you very much. And I call Councillor Galanders of the Conservative Group, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I want to be clear, on this side of the House, there's any new tax on our local businesses, many of which are still desperately struggling to recover from the massive hit of the COVID pandemic. We already pay a lot of taxes, business rates, employer national insurance, corporation, VAT, to name but a few. I fundly oppose this attempt to match the tax on Bristol businesses. The Labour amendment isn't perfect, but it recognises that the levy is just greenwashing for a taxing. We agree with the words of the amendment. The imposition of a new tax on citizens and businesses of Bristol needs to be given due consideration. Agreeing to a new tax without knowing how much it would raise, nor its potential drawbacks, would be negligent on the part of the Council. We will therefore be supporting this amendment. The Greens may not care about killing off Bristol's businesses with punitive new taxes, but Conservatives do. Local business leaders have roundly condemned the proposed workplace parking tax as the last. I believe it could lead to a massive reduction in commercial property use in central Bristol. The warm welcome and seductive lower taxes of South Gloucestershire will prove all the more alluring. Do we really want to accelerate the exodus of from Britain? As a concept, the workplace parking tax is well past its by date. One of the key original objectives was to improve air quality, now superseded by the clean air zone, not to mention the growing number of cars seen in Bristol. Will the proposed tax apply to parking spaces occupied by blue badge holders? Will it apply to electric cars? What about parking spaces? Service, schools? We're told it won't. If there are too many exceptions to any rule, it probably means the rule is rubbish. In summary, my Lord Mayor, this workplace parking tax is ill thought out, time, actively anachronistic. It won't help air quality. It won't help our reputation. We will therefore support the amendment, which is a full review and new scoping study, which hopefully will expose the utter folly of this additional tax burden on Bristol's proposed part once and for all. Businesses need a break. Please give them a break by voting for the amendment. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I now call Councillor Brown on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Brown, you have 3 minutes.
When I saw the Green Party had brought this motion on workplace parking, or corporate parking, I was somewhat surprised given that the appraisal approach is being worked on. However, I was also supportive and keen to see additional work done to advance a proposition which could have a positive impact on the amount of commuter traffic coming into our city and raise funds to invest in active travel and public transport. Labour's response, as outlined in this amendment, is not so much to kick the idea into the long grass, but to check it into a long-haul flight with no return ticket. I think the Cabinet member has made this clear in his speech, attacking both the principle of a levy as well as that features of the design. Tonight, we're only talking about the principle of it. Features of design can be subject to consultation and further working through across parties in this chamber and in this council. He mentioned the cost to teachers and others, £400 a year, without neglecting to mention that the cost of clean air zones to someone caught by it is over £2,000 per annum, whether they're a teacher, a carer, or whatever. Members can see for themselves that they have no intention of progressing this, regardless of what the current appraisal says. Instead, they suggest a further study will be required to take into account the effect of the clean air zone, kicking it further down the track. This is a red herring. The clean air zone seeks to improve the quality of the air in the city and penalise those with the most polluting vehicles. Mitigation measures are going to be put in place to help people upgrade their vehicles so that they are compliant. A workplace parking levy, on the other hand, is designed to discourage car use in general and to recoup some of the costs associated with commuter traffic for those who do opt to pay the charge, whether as businesses or individuals. Last year, there was a lot of talk of building back better, grabbing the opportunities to change working and travel patterns that COVID let us see were possible. This year, it seems, the administration is ready to business as usual. I urge members to vote against this amendment if they want to keep the option of the workplace parking levy, if not on the table, at least in the city.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alexander, as mover of the amendment, would you like to respond to the debate?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to point out how we've handled the clean air zone. So what we've been doing is that we have secured £42 million that we wouldn't have got by taking time, by negotiating with government, and that £42 million will go to support the worst off people who will suffer the most negative impacts. What I would say about voting for a tax in principle, a tax is not a principle. It's about detail. It's about who pays, how much they pay, and who gets let off that. So you're not voting for a principle here. You're voting to take it right through. We're not prepared to do that. We want to see the detail. We want to examine it. And yes, it will take some time. It's not kicking the can down the road, but we will be voting for the Labour amendment, and That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Wilcox, as mover of the substantive motion, would you like to respond to the debate on the amendment?
Yes, I would. I'm disappointed by the Labour amendment, and the Green Group classifies it as a hostile one. This amendment removes any sense of urgency for the implementation by removing any mention of a timeline for when the workplace parking levy will be consulted on, let alone introduced. And the Labour group have not been actually talking about the contents of their amendment. They've only been talking against the concept of a workplace parking levy. The Green Group first proposed a clean air zone in 2016. Will it take 6 years to provide a workplace parking levy? Also, a workplace parking levy has been adopted by the Labour administration in the Joint Local Transport Plan 4 since March 2020, but it has not appeared in the Mayor's Forward Plan. We are in a climate emergency and the clock is ticking. We need to encourage modal shift from private motor vehicles onto public transport or active travel. A clean air zone only creates revenue when a polluting vehicle enters the zone. Over time, the number of vehicles will be reduced, especially as the council offers generous subsidies to replace the polluting vehicles. An electric or low-emission vehicle occupies the same road space as an internal combustion one. It will make little or no difference to our heavily congested city. A workplace parking levy is complementary to a clean air zone, and it will reduce the number of journeys into Bristol, freeing up much-needed road space to be dedicated to public transport and active travel. This will improve journey times for all road users. Parking spaces are considered perks at many Bristol-based companies, and which are only given to senior management. So why are Labour arguing against a tax against a perk to senior management? I find this very difficult to believe. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're now going to move to vote on the Labour amendment. And unfortunately, the technical problems that we're suffering today have also affected our electronic voting system. So this is going to be a roll call vote. Your names will be called out in alphabetical order. Please respond to your name by clearly saying for, against or abstain. And I remind you, this is the Labour amendment that we are voting on at this stage. People watching this remotely may not be able to hear every vote because not everyone has a microphone in front of them, but you will, I believe, be able to see them entered into the spreadsheet on the screen as we go.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Don Alexander. For. Councillor Leslie Alexander.
For.
Councillor Ali.
For.
Councillor Bales.
For.
Councillor Bartle.
Against.
Councillor Beach.
For.
Councillor Bennett.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Cheney.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Classic.
Against.
Councillor Cole.
For.
Councillor Craig.
For.
Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer.
Against.
Councillor Dyer. Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor English. Councillor Fitzgibbon. Councillor Fitzjohn.
Against.
Councillor Fodor. Councillor Francis.
Against.
Councillor Geeta. Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Gollop. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Goulandris. Councillor Grant.
Against.
Councillor Hance.
Against.
Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hathway.
Against.
Councillor Holland. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hornchen. Councillor Hooker. Councillor Hulme. Councillor Jammer. Councillor Kent. Councillor King. Councillor Mack. Councillor Macawi. Councillor Massey. Councillor Michelat. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Morris. Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Plowden. Councillor Poultney. Councillor Courtley. Councillor Renard. Councillor Rippington. Councillor James Scott. Councillor Sharon Scott. Councillor Stafford Townsend. Councillor Stone. Councillor Townsend. Councillor Varney.
Against.
Councillor Weston. Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Windows. Councillor Y. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So we have 33 votes in favour of the amendment, 32 against and no abstentions. So that amendment is carried. Now, I understand we have an amendment to be moved by the Liberal Democrat group.
Yes, Lord Mayor. It is Amendment 2 on your sheets.
Thank you very much. So this amendment has been moved from the floor, so it isn't on the website currently, but printed copies have been handed out, hopefully to all councillors. Ah, okay. Right, there's some copies on their way to you. So as they're coming, I believe these have been emailed by the Liberal Democrat group as well to party group leaders and whips earlier this afternoon. So in the printed copy that you've got, we're looking at amendment number 2 on the second page. And I'm now going to call Councillor Hartley of the Liberal Democrat group to move the amendment. Councillor Hartley, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to apologise to members of the public at home who likely have no idea what is happening. The reason I put this amendment from the floor is to attempt to improve upon the Labour amendment that just passed this chamber. The original motion had a specific timetable spelled out for the delivery of a consultation and potential implementation. Given that it's been 18 months since the Green Budget Amendment requested an appraisal report that we have yet to see, I'm sure members can understand why we feel a delivery timetable is important to this process. The Bristol Dems looked at a workplace parking levy back in 2011, but due to opposition from business and government, it had to be abandoned. However, a lot has changed in the last 10 years, with many more people and businesses showing greater care to the environment, and worsening pollution levels mean this issue must be revisited immediately. The Labour amendment shouts about the benefits of the clean air zone, while suggesting the workplace parking levy is past it, or a poor idea. The success of Nottingham's workplace parking levy scheme is clear, as it's the highest level of bus tram usage per head outside of London, with customer satisfaction levels continuing to rise across all areas. Leicester, Hounslow and Oxford are all progressing with WPL schemes, yet Bristol is falling behind. Given the climate emergency that was declared in 2018, we must investigate all possible options that could reduce the number of cars on Bristol streets, as per the administration's stated goals, rather than focusing solely on the clean air zone. We also feel it is incredibly important for any revenue that is raised by a potential workplace parking levy to be ring-fenced, to invest in sustainable and active transport, so that as a council we are providing both a carrot and a stick to drivers by nudging them from their cars through the workplace parking levy while providing them with much better public transport. We have seen too much wastage from this administration's pursuit of vanity projects and high-cost outside consultants, so this revenue must be protected to allow us to build a 21st century sustainable transport network. Labour's actions with their amendment is clear. They wanted to shrink the idea of a workplace parking levy to be small enough to fit in Mayor Rees's pocket and allow him to snuff it out. Our amendment is designed to make sure that this motion is strengthened, that workplace parking levy is truly thought about, that it is timetabled, and that any potential revenue is ring-fenced and protected. If you truly believe in the idea of a workplace parking levy, I hope you will vote for this amendment tonight. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I now ask Councillor Clark to second the amendment, please. You have 3 minutes.
I rise to second our amendment. I would just like to say very, very quickly that I think the notion, Councillor Hartley has already picked up on it, of actually using the money that is generated for public good, so that we make sure this carrot and stick argument is really important.
actually giving people active options and alternatives to using their car on a daily basis is really important in changing behaviours in the short term and the long term. And I believe that this motion enables the city to move in the right direction and provide better facilities and resources through this levy for our citizens to enjoy, with cleaner air and a better environment. So I rise to second it, as I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from speakers debating the amendment, and I call Councillor Don Alexander of the Labour Group. Please, 3 minutes. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank the Liberal Democrat Group on behalf of the people of Bristol for the timely presentation of this amendment to me about half an hour ago, which has given us absolutely no time to read it. We absolutely agree with all the positive outcomes just stated by Joss. That would be our intention. Should we bring in a workplace parking levy, to use it for active travel, to use it for improving public transport, and that is in fact laid down in the 2000 law. What we object to is point 3, which returns us to the initial motion. It says here, to publish a timetable delivery plan for a workplace parking levy scheme with the aim of going out to consultation by April 2022, with full implementation within 2 years of that date. Is that a different one?
Point of order, Lord Mayor, that's the wrong amendment. That's Amendment 1. It's Amendment 2 that we put forward.
Well, is this not the problem? Where is Amendment 2? On the second page. So, Amendment 1.
Essentially, the amendment negates our own amendment. So one.
Yeah. Amendment 2. Ah, I see. Okay. Nottingham Jones. Pardon? Something new to object to? Well, I think we will need time to examine this. We haven't had time to examine it. And given the spirit of Amendment 1, we will not be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I now call Councillor Galandris of the Conservative Group to speak on the amendment. Councillor Gollop, apologies, my notes are incorrect. Councillor Gollop, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's interesting to note, my Lord Mayor, that the Lib Dems may be under new leadership, but they still have a policy of jumping on other people's bandwagons. I very much hope you don't park it in a corporate space this evening and end up with a charge. But I want to ask members to just think for a moment. I want you to think the unimaginable. Think about our beloved city hit by a pandemic, people forced to work from home, shops closed, restaurants closed, businesses suffering, footfall decimated. And the great brains of the Greens and the Lib Dems come together and think, what can we do? Let's bring in a tax on parking spaces to stop people coming into our cities. Let's punish business. Let's actually look at those businesses who are just realising they need less desks, who are just realising that neighbouring authorities make them very welcome. What do those businesses think? Why am I in Bristol? Why am I adding to the footfall? Why am I supporting those businesses that are already there? My Lord Mayor, what's going to happen if we follow this policy? We will end up with less jobs in Bristol, more jobs in our neighbouring authorities. We'll end up with less businesses paying business rates in our city. We'll end up with less rents being paid in our city. And that will mean less money in the council's general fund to spend on providing services for the most vulnerable and the most needy in our society. Talking about the extra money raised by a parking levy is one thing. you have to talk about the money we're going to lose, the money that will not be in our budget and not available to spend. That is why I oppose the way the motion is worded. Now, we come to the Lib Dem amendment, and that is simply parking a bandwagon. So, my Lord Mayor, the most embarrassing thing about tonight, for me and my colleagues, we find ourselves looking at the new elder statesman of the Labour Party, Don Alexander, and his stirring speech on behalf of how this should be approached. And we can't believe we're sat here supporting Don, saying he's spoken well, and looking forward to working with him on making this work. The other positive thing, my Lord Mayor, is to hear about the consideration that's being made here, because I look forward to Don doing exactly the same thing on the Park Street bus gate, the Victoria Room bus gate, and the North View bus gate. My Lord Mayor, we can't support this ridiculous amendment. It's just wasting our time. We will support the substantive motion that is Don Alexander's amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I call Councillor Fodor to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Lord Mayor, we're having a good chance to debate the ins and outs of a levy on corporate parking today. This discussion is long overdue, since it's such an important tool in the powers we have as a council, and it's been shown to work so well to provide the revenue we always say we must have to improve public transport and active travel. These are the policies, these are what your colleagues in Nottingham have tapped so effectively. I hope you've been speaking to them, but it appears you haven't heard what they've found. After years of talk and saying it's been considered as part of our council and regional transport strategy, where it's already identified as part of the solution to manage congestion, it's time that we actually get on with implementing it, not just thinking about it, talking about it, all that blah, blah, blah. That's what's needed in an emergency. We do need a commitment for a prompt timescale for all the consultations and details like exemptions and support schemes to be worked out. We have to get on with it. I have a few quibbles with the Lib Dem proposal, I've had few quibbles with the Lib Dem proposals, and we would have happily incorporated most of the points they discussed with us in an altered motion, rather than in having all these debates. But not every party agreed to an altered motion that combined the best features. So the amendment is mainly firming up the action needed, and it leaves the vast majority of Labour's changes to the motion intact. Let's hope they're therefore willing to support it as well, but I fear they have closed ears to that. Most importantly, this amendment strengthens the delivery of this project, should the administration go ahead with it, because it adds a clear timetable for delivery, all of these stages that we always go through in getting on with any project. Why wouldn't this administration actually want to consult and develop such a proven method of managing road space when the main beneficiaries of free workplace parking are the better paid? As the amendment says, the income from the levy is ring-fenced to develop the reliable transport choices we desperately need. We do need all our city partners on board, so I hope the Chamber supports this amendment, calls on the Mayor to work with city partners without delay, to come up with a scheme that can be implemented with the support of major city organisations, just like Nottingham does. Nottingham, which has not lost a single business from their city. In fact, they welcome the reduced congestion and pollution and the support for travel to work. We need this to be done in ways that support staff getting to work on time, not stuck in traffic jams on dangerous roads they're frightened to cycle on or can't cross on foot. The funds will add to the support needed for those who currently have limited travel choices in our city. Please join the Greens in supporting this amendment. It's constructive. We need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hartley, as mover of the amendment, would you like to respond to the debate?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, never did I think I would see bedfellows of Councillor Alexander and Councillor Gollop. Councillor Gollop says the Lib Dems are jumping on the bandwagon. Is it not, in fact, the Conservatives that are jumping on the Labour bandwagon, forming an unholy alliance across our chamber in favour of protecting big business? It is clear that there are only two parties in Bristol that offer truly progressive and environmental politics. The Labour Party administration in Bristol refused to listen to the ideas of others, determined to channel purely their own thoughts, even if other ideas are offered. It is clear that the Conservative Party is once again listening to its friends in big business rather than listening to Bristol's residents. In 2017, it was estimated that congestion costed Bristol's economy £154 million per year, while costing Bristol's drivers an average of £845 a year in additional petrol and maintenance costs. Workplace parking levy schemes have been shown to reduce congestion and, twinned with additional sustainable transport investment, could save Bristol's economy and drivers millions of pounds, as well as reducing air pollution and carbon emissions. I beseech all members, do not listen to what your party says, but listen to the facts. A workplace parking levy would reduce the number of cars in the city centre, reducing air pollution, carbon emissions and congestion, benefiting Bristol's lungs and its wallet. A reduction in the number of cars would benefit Bristol's commuters, who would benefit from reduced wait times. Revenue provided, which could be £10 million per year, could be invested in sustainable and active travel, vastly improving upon Bristol's poor current provision without the need for a fanciful metro system. Let me be clear. If our amendment is passed, it will strengthen this motion and help to ensure a workplace parking levy can be part of Bristol's journey to zero carbon by 2030. If you believe in a workplace parking levy for Bristol, please vote for this amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilcox, as mover of the substantive motion, would you like to respond to the debate on the amendment?
Thank you. This motion, the Lib Dem amendment, calls upon the Council to share the report and, as long as it is positive, to set out a timetable for delivery. That's the crux of the matter. We're not leaping into this with all open arms. We want to find out what the benefits to Bristol are, and we want that report to be timetabled appropriately. Not one company has moved away from Nottingham, citing the workplace parking levy as the reason. In fact, it has attracted companies to the city with improved commuting journey times by both cars and public transport. Better air and has better air quality. As a result, car use has dropped by 7% in Nottingham. And given recent settlements from Westminster and the £23 million shortfall in the mid-term financial plan, Bristol City Council needs to look at other revenue generation methods. This is a direct finance generation method that the Mayor has recently spoken about at COP26. Given the urgency of the climate emergency, now is not the time for half measures. Please support this amendment.
Thank you. So we'll move to the vote on that amendment. Once again, this will be a roll call vote, so please respond to your names with for, against or abstain. And this is the vote on the Liberal Democrat amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Don Alexander. Against. Councillor Leslie Alexander.
Against.
Councillor Ali. Against. Councillor Bales. Against. Councillor Bartle. For. Councillor Beach. Against. Councillor Bennett. Against. Councillor Breckles. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Cheney. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Classic.
For.
Councillor Cole. Councillor Craig. Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer. Councillor Dyer. Councillor Eddy.
Against.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor English. Councillor Fitzgibbon. Councillor Fitzjohn. Councillor Fodor. Councillor Francis. Councillor Geeta. Councillor Goggin.
Against.
Councillor Gollop. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Goulandris. Councillor Grant.
For.
Councillor Hance. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hathway.
For.
Councillor Holland. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hornchen. Councillor Hooker, Councillor Hulme, Councillor Jammer, Councillor Kent, Councillor King, Councillor Mack, Councillor Macari, Councillor Massey, Councillor Michelat, Councillor Mohammed, Councillor Morris, Councillor O'Rourke, Councillor Parsons, Councillor Pearce, Councillor Plowden, Councillor Pulteney, Councillor Courtley, Councillor Renard, Councillor Rippington, Councillor James Scott, Councillor Sharon Scott, Councillor Stafford Townsend, Councillor Stone, Councillor Townsend, Councillor Varney, Councillor Weston, Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Windows, Councillor Y. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we have 32 votes for the amendment, 33 against and no abstention, so that amendment falls. That leaves us now with the motion on the table, which is the motion as proposed by Councillor Wilcox and as amended by the Labour amendment. And we now move to debate on that amended motion. And I call Councillor Rippington to speak on behalf of the Labour group. Councillor Rippington, you have 3 minutes.
Light on. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have a lot of sympathy with the Green councillors opposite on this one. At the end of the day, all they really want to see is progress on getting a decent public transport system for Bristol. I also understand the concerns that my own colleagues on these benches have about rushing into things without the evidence to support whether they will work or not. So I'm not going to get into the political arguments about taxes and so forth again, because at the end of the day, I don't think the passing of this motion is going to make a dramatic difference to the eventual outcome, although we will be voting for it. Instead, I'm just going to read a summary of some events that took place in the recent past in this city, and I want you to see if you can spot how many of the things mentioned here we are still talking about today. Call it a game of bingo, if you like. The Bristol Supertram project was launched in March 2001. Bristol was one of 25 cities that were selected for light rail development by the new Labour government as part of a 10-year plan to improve public transport in the UK. Bristol's scheme was to cost £194 million. The first stage of the project was the construction of a route from Bristol city centre to Almondsbury. The 10-mile journey would be completed in 30 minutes and make 16 stops. The line would start from a central terminus in Union Street, running along roads until it reached Temple Meads. From here, it would join the rail network, passing through New Station at Ashley Down, bingo, and Horfield before entering South Gloucestershire. At Parkway Station, the line would depart from the rail network and follow a purpose-built track serving park and ride schemes for both the M4 and M5. The line was intended to provide an affordable and efficient transport service that would improve the economic competitiveness of the North Bristol and South Gloucestershire corridor. It was predicted that the service would become operational in 2007. An argument then ensued between Bristol and South Gloucestershire as to where the line should terminate. An independent survey demonstrated that the Bristol Council proposal was feasible and cost-effective, whereas the Cribbs Causeway alternative favoured by South Gloucestershire did not meet the criteria for funding. With the rejection of the Cribbs Causeway proposal, South Gloucestershire Council decided to withdraw from the Supertram project. With the departure of South Gloucestershire, Bristol Council submitted a modified route plan for a new line that would terminate at Parkway Station. It was during this period that the council found itself under political pressure to reduce a proposed local council tax increase. With financial pressure from the council and growing uncertainty about the new project, the administration recommended that it should be abandoned. In
Councillor
March
Rippington,
2004,
you're over your time now. Can you wind up, please?
Bristol City Council announced that the Supertram project would be cancelled. So can you imagine what things would be like for us now if the scheme had gone ahead? We could be on our second or even third extension by now. Many of today's traffic problems would have already been addressed. The people of Bristol and South Gloucestershire
Councillor
were failed
Rippington,
badly
you're well
in
over time. Wind up,
2004.
please.
And with pressures of climate change now upon us, I say this to the Mayor, Metro Mayor, council leaders, elected representatives and officers from across the region. We must be brave, we must be radical,
Right.
but whatever
Councillor
it takes, we
Rippington,
must
you're
not
well
fail
over.
again.
Please sit down. Thank you. Right, I now call Councillor Mack on behalf of the Green Group, please. Councillor Mack, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Thank you, Lord Mayor. We have so many good things to spend money on. We all have ideas: homelessness support, social care, carbon neutral houses, buses, bike lanes. But we're always told there isn't money. I am Joint Shadow Cabinet Member for Finance. I understand these pressures. We have massive financial pressures. We are asked for solutions. Here's a solution. We are the opposition and we've come forwards with a solution, a costed, sensible idea to fund some of these improvements we are looking for in the city. Councillor Bennett, you talked about what's specific, how are we going to spend this money? I mean, you're in the leading party. I'd hope you'd have some influence on how we would spend this money, you know, if we found it, if we went forwards with this. There were concerns about not being specific enough about how we would spend this. In my new role as Shadow Cabinet Member, I've spent a lot of time considering our budget, and I would love to hear what public spending my colleagues think would be bad spending for this levy in a year when we're facing 5% cuts to our core spending. Labour could have done the right thing for the sake of the city. Instead, they brought forward an amendment to weaken this motion and try to make us look bad. This amendment reads as if it's been co-written by the Tories, referring to tax as always a bad thing. Taxes are how we fund social support. It's a core of socialism. Are you socialists? A levy on a large business is not a tax on individuals. We are asking businesses to contribute towards improvements for the city. Also, this isn't just good green economics, this is good economics. Some employers will decide to get rid of parking spaces. That parking space, that free space, could be used for housing. It could be used for commercial opportunities that actually benefit the city. We will be supporting this amended motion because although we are disappointed about the amendment weakening it, it's still a great idea. It still calls for the administration to report back to full council on the appraisal report's findings and hopefully produce a delivery timetable. Despite the hostility to this positive policy, I'm pleased that we've put it firmly on the agenda tonight.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. To make it very quick and answer your question, no, I'm not a socialist, but that will probably not come as any great surprise to you. I know, the tie gives it away. I would just say one thing, though. A basic law of economics, if you tax business, invariably they will pass that on. That's how this works. So they either pass it on to employees, some of which are teachers and things we've heard that can ill afford it, or they tax it on to consumers. They will just pass it on. So it is a tax in every single way. The amendment, now the substantive, is beneficial in the fact that at least it looks at both sides of that ledger. It looks at how what the money raises, but it should also look at what it costs. We're already seeing shops leave the city centre and they're heading into South Gloss. Let's be brutally honest about it. If we introduce a workplace parking levy, the only people rubbing their hands are our neighbouring authorities. Because in the end, it will cost us money. It'll cost consumers and it'll cost the coffers of this council. So let's get the full costed implication report, which is what the now substantive motion does, and let's move to the vote.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weston. But before we do that, I'm going to call Councillor Varney to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The city of Nottingham is world famous as the city of Robin Hood, Maid Marian and Friar Tuck. However, it will soon be famous for something else. It is likely to become the UK's first carbon-neutral city by 2028, 2 full years before Bristol's own target of 2030. Unlike Bristol, whose air quality has been deteriorating year on year and whose population is dying at a rate of almost 1 citizen a day as a direct consequence of the pollution, the air quality in Nottingham is actually improving. In fact, carbon dioxide emissions have decreased by around 25% since 2015. Nottingham has achieved this largely by introducing a parking levy, with the money raised ring-fenced for improvements to public transport. This particular scheme, currently the only one in existence in the UK, was introduced in 2012 and has so far raised over £60 million to put towards a new 20-mile tram system and improvements to bus services. Local businesses were not first, but because the levy was ring-fenced for public and congestion has subsequently decreased, Nottingham is now seen as an attractive place to do business, and companies are actively choosing to locate in the city. Thousands of people drive into Bristol every day, contributing towards our appalling air quality. By asking them to contribute financially towards a solution via a workplace parking levy, we can improve our public transport, improve our air quality, and improve the health and well-being of our citizens. If it can work in Nottingham, there's no reason why it can't work here in Bristol. We Liberal Democrats support a workplace parking levy. Indeed, I spoke about it from the public gallery in 2019. We are disappointed by the Labour amendment, which considerably weakens the original motion. However, we will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilcox, for the final time, would you like to respond as mover of the substantive motion?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'd like to say, tick-tock, the clock is ticking. Bristol needs to do something about its congestion and transport situation, and we've chosen to defer that decision for another 2 years at least. I can guarantee that a Green councillor will be asking a question at full council of the Mayor: where is the workplace parking levy plan, and when will it be deployed? Till we get a sensible answer from the administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to the vote on the amended motion, which will again be by a roll call.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Don Alexander. Councillor Leslie Alexander.
4.
Councillor Ali. Councillor Bales. Councillor Bartle. Councillor Beach. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Breckles. Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Cheney. Councillor Clark. Councillor Classic. Councillor Cole. Councillor Craig. Councillor Davies. Councillor Denyer. Councillor Dyer. Councillor Eddy.
4.
Councillor Edwards. Councillor English. Councillor Fitzgibbon. Councillor Fitzjohn. Councillor Fodor. Councillor Francis. Councillor Geeta. Councillor Goggin.
4.
Councillor Gollop. Councillor Goodman. Councillor Goulandris. Councillor Grant. Councillor Hants. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hathway. Councillor Holland. Councillor Hopkins. Councillor Hornchen. Councillor Hooker. Councillor Hulme. Councillor Jammer. Councillor Kent. Councillor King. Councillor Mack. Councillor Makawi. Councillor Massey. Councillor Michelat. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Morris. Councillor O'Rourke. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Plowden. Councillor Pulteney. Councillor Courtley. Councillor Renard. Councillor Rippington. Councillor James Scott. Councillor Sharon Scott. Councillor Stafford Townsend. Councillor Stone. Councillor Townsend. Councillor Varney. Councillor Weston. Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Windows. And Councillor Y. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So with 62 votes for, none against and no abstentions, that motion is carried. Now, I have been asked to put it to the Council that we extend the meeting further to consider the silver motion. So, I'm going to test the appetite for that by asking party leaders. Councillor Pearce, it's your silver motion. Do you want to extend the meeting by a further 20-25 minutes?
Yes, please.
Councillor O'Rourke? No, thank you. Councillor Weston? No, thank you. Councillor Clark? No, thank you. Well, in that case, I think the answer is a no. So that concludes today's meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending. The next meeting of full council will be on the 7th of December. Good evening.